Chapter 298. Chapter 298. Guan Xueming's selfish motives. Guan Exin was born into a family of scholars and doctors. House Guan was now on the same level as some of the bigger houses, but Guan Exin didn't have any of the bad habits of a rich young miss. Her parents were busy with work and her father was a shareholder of the hospital, but his company was out of town. It was rare for him and his mother to come home. Guan Exin had been by her grandfather's side since she was young, so she learned how to clean the house, wash clothes and cook. She managed the house neatly, and although Nanny Lu was there, Guan Exin would always help Nanny Lu every time she came home. Her cooking skills were superb, and she was known as the super invincible beauty god of cooking in the family area of the medical school. Whenever Guan Exin cooked, her grandfather's old friends would shamelessly come over to eat with her. Guan Exin's cultured and refined demeanor made her the object of admiration for all the boys her age in the medical school's family area. However, the Guan family's strict upbringing forbade dating before graduation, so many admirers were deterred from pursuing her. Guan Xueming, on the other hand, entered society and started working after graduation. It was just that Guan Xueming's reputation was getting bigger and bigger, and those old friends who came to visit him stopped bringing it up. Guan Xueming's reputation was now on the same level as the bigger houses, and no one knew if Guan Exin would marry into a rich family, but Guan Exin was a good wife and loving mother. She was definitely the first choice for a rich family's daughter-in-law. Guan Exin breathed a sigh of relief. She'd just graduated and her career hadn't even started yet. How could she be in the mood for a relationship? But even if she wasn't in the mood, there were times when love couldn't be stopped. When Guan Exin had first developed feelings for Lin Yi, she'd found it strange and inconceivable. It was the first time she'd developed feelings for a boy, and the old Guan Exin had even thought that there was something wrong with her sexual orientation. Perhaps she was just a little late in her development? Guan Exin comforted herself, but she felt that there was no longer any possibility between her and Lin Yi. She'd fantasized about it, but reality was reality. Guan Exin had chosen to run away from him the first time she saw him. But after running away, she couldn't help but want to see Lin Yi again. It was a conflicted feeling. She knew that it was impossible, but she still wanted to see him. It was like a moth flying into a flame. It was somewhat impulsive and irrational, but it was uncontrollable. "Xinxin, do you need Auntie Lu's help?" Auntie Lu's voice came from outside the kitchen. After tidying up the house, Auntie Lu came to help Guan Exin in the kitchen. "No need, I can do it myself." Guan Exin rejected Auntie Lu's offer of help, but she couldn't let Auntie Lu come. If Auntie Lu saw her cooking secret, she'd definitely stop her from messing around. Auntie Lu didn't think much about it. She knew that Master Guan was going to introduce a handsome young man to Guan Exin. Auntie Lu thought that Guan Exin was tempted and wanted to show off her invincible cooking skills. If someone were to help, how would they show off the super invincible young god of cooking in the universe? One had to admit that Guan Exin's cooking skills were excellent. Even though the seasoning was messed up, the dishes were still delicious and tasteless. If one didn't taste it and just looked at the appearance, it would definitely make one salivate. Whether it was the color or the fragrance, they were all excellent. But after one taste, one would find that every dish was either salty, sour, or sweet. In short, none of the dishes had a normal taste. Before Guan Exin took the dishes out of the wok, she would add a random seasoning to the dishes. Guan Xueming looked at Guan Exin, who was busy cooking, and he was happy. Such a virtuous, beautiful, gentle and well-mannered granddaughter should be able to make Lin Yi enjoy it so much that he forgot to go home, right? If Guan Exin came to his house a few more times, all the medical problems he had would be solved by her. If Guan Xueming could become his grandson-in-law, the Guan clan would be prosperous for the next 100 years. Although the Guan clan's status was comparable to the big houses, and even the heads of the big houses were respectful to them, Guan Xueming knew very well that it was all because of him. He was Miracle Dr. Guan, and that was why the Guan clan's status was so high. Everyone would die one day, and knowing a miracle doctor was the same as having a guarantee of life. This was also why the Guan clan's status had risen so quickly these past few years. But if Guan Xueming was gone one day, the Guan clan's status would plummet. Without a miracle doctor, the Guan clan would be no different from a normal small family. Although Guan Xueming wasn't someone who cared about fame and fortune, he couldn't not think about his children and grandchildren. Especially his granddaughter, Guan Xueming was even more worried about her. Finding a good husband for her had become his main concern. Looking at Lin Yi reminded him of Guan Xen. If his granddaughter could be with Lin Yi, then the Guan clan's reputation wouldn't fall because of his passing, but would instead rise. Guan Xuemin knew very well what kind of miracle doctor was he. Lin Yi was the miracle doctor. And that miracle doctor he met 20 years ago. That was the real deal. His eldest son's family had settled in Yanjing, living a wealthy life. His youngest son and his wife were busy with business, and only their daughter Guan Xen was by their side. Guan Xuemin didn't have much to worry about with his two sons. His eldest son didn't have any skills, but he'd made quite a bit of money through Guan Xuemin's connections, enough for them to live the rest of their lives. Guan Xuemin didn't have a good impression of his eldest son, and he didn't want to return to a small place like Songshan ever since he'd been exposed to the upper class. He only came back once during the holidays, which disappointed Guan Xuemin quite a bit. His youngest son, on the other hand, came back often and was a righteous person, albeit a bit old-fashioned. He relied on his own ability to do business and never mentioned Guan Xuemin's name outside. Logically speaking, with his youngest son's personality, if he didn't have any background or backing, he would definitely be disadvantaged in society. However, his luck wasn't bad. In his early years he met a benefactor, a legendary figure. Unfortunately, this person also disappeared from everyone's sight in the same year as the genius doctor who had taught Guan Xuemin, becoming a legend. Xen, there's no need to make so many dishes. It's enough to eat. Guan Xuemin was a bit puzzled as he watched his granddaughter run around, preparing a table full of delicacies. Had his granddaughter really grown up? Was she starting to care about her marriage? Was she going to show off in front of this young man? Chapter 299. How about instant noodles? His youngest son had received guidance from a great benefactor, and his business had grown considerably, but Guan Xuemin's only regret was that there was no one in the family who studied medicine. His granddaughter's weak personality meant that she could only be a nurse, and she wasn't cut out to study medicine either. That was why Guan Xuemin had always wanted to find someone to pass on his legacy to, or he wouldn't have been so surprised to see Lin Yi at the bookstore and wanted to take Lin Yi as his last disciple. But that thought was gone now. His medical skills weren't even a third of Lin Yi's, so what was the point of passing on his legacy? It wasn't even certain who would be whose teacher. But no matter what, Guan Xuemin had something to look forward to. Ding! The doorbell rang. Lin Yi parked the car in front of Guan Xuemin's villa and pressed the doorbell. Guan Xuemin was overjoyed at the ring. He quickly stood up and waved at Auntie Lu, who was about to open the door. He'd open the door himself. Guan Xuemin didn't dare put on any airs when it came to Lin Yi. There was no such thing as learning, and Lin Yi was better than him. Lin Yi, you're here, Guan Xuemin said happily when he opened the door and saw Lin Yi. Nice to meet you, Grandpa Guan. I came right after school and didn't bring any gifts, so please don't mind me. Lin Yi smiled as he spread his empty hands. Other people brought gifts when they came to Guan Xuemin's house, but Lin Yi came empty-handed. What gifts? Guan Xuemin was amused by Lin Yi's words. I'm happy that you're here. It wasn't easy for me to be so thick-skinned as to call you and invite you over for a drink or two. If you keep being so polite, I won't call you again no matter how thick-skinned I am. All right, then I'll come over when I'm free, Lin Yi said with a smile. That's more like it. Guan Xuemin nodded matter-of-factly. Guan Xen was walking out of the kitchen with a plate of sweet and sour mustard fish in her hands when she heard someone boasting that he could come over for free food. She wasn't happy at all. Who are you? You're here to freeload? Did he really not treat himself as an outsider? Alright, since you came to eat, I'll let you eat your fill. Let's see if you dare to come again next time. Tonight's sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, and numbing feast will definitely be fresh in your memory. However, the voice sounded familiar. Had it been to his house before? Guan Xen frowned but didn't pay much attention to it. She was just about to put the fish on the table when she looked up and froze, almost dropping the fish on the floor. Guan Xen's eyes widened in disbelief. Why was he the one who wanted to freeload all the time in the future? Guan Xen. Lin Yi was startled. What was Guan Xen doing here? He suddenly remembered what Guan Xuemin had said about his granddaughter. Could Guan Xen be his granddaughter? Both of them had the same surname. Your Grandpa Guan's granddaughter? You're the handsome young man Grandpa was talking about? Guan Xen blushed. Why was he the handsome young man Grandpa was talking about? Didn't he already have a girlfriend? Why was Grandpa introducing him to her? Guan Xin didn't know what to do. She wanted to hide her feelings for Lin Yi from the bottom of her heart, but she lowered her head shyly. Handsome young man? Lin Yi paused at the title and smiled bitterly. I'm not considered a young genius, but I'm young and promising. I can barely call myself that. Bragging. Guan Xin couldn't help but smile. What kind of person was this immodest? Wasn't handsome, young and promising about the same? Grandma Wang was praising herself for selling her melons. You know Xin. Guan Xuemin was afraid that his granddaughter would be conflicted, but he understood after seeing her expression. It seemed like the two knew each other a long time ago, so he was worrying needlessly. Yes, we just met today. Lin Yi nodded. Oh, just met today? Looks like we're very close. Guan Xuemin listened to Lin Yi's words. That saves me the trouble of introducing myself. Since you know Xin, it's even easier. Let's skip the introductions and eat. I've been starving for a long time. I eat early every day and I waited until now just to wait for you. Alright. I won't hold back then. Lin Yi smiled as he turned to Guan Xin. What a coincidence, I was supposed to try out your cooking today. Ah. Guan Xin jumped and ran towards the kitchen with the mustard fish in her hands. She never would have thought that the handsome young man Grandpa was talking about was Lin Yi. She wouldn't have made these weird dishes if she'd known earlier. She would have prepared with all her heart and skills if she'd known earlier. Guan Xin regretted it a little. If Lin Yi ate the feast she prepared, he'd probably never come again. What should she do? Guan Xin wanted to throw away all the dishes on the table and make a new one. Xin, where are you going? Why are you taking the fish away? Grandpa loves sweet and sour fish the most. Bring it back, Grandpa can't wait. Guan Xuemin waved his hand at Guan Xin. I'm going back to the pot. The dishes are cold, I'm going back to the pot. Guan Xin said as she tried to grab the other dishes from the table. She could just throw them away and make a new one. There were still some ingredients left, so she could make as much as she could. Back to the pot? Back to what pot? It's not cold, it's steaming. Stop messing around and put it down. Guan Xuemin was confused by Guan Xin's actions. What was she doing? Guan Xin didn't have a choice. She reluctantly put down the dishes and the sweet and sour fish. Alright Xin, you sit down too. Let's eat together. Guan Xuemin couldn't wait to open a bottle of Maotai and pour a cup for Lin Yi before pouring one for himself. Alright. Guan Xin was reluctant. But there was nothing she could do. She sat down with a sad face. I've heard from Grandpa Guan that you're a great cook. The dishes on the table are delicious. Let me try them. Lin Yi smiled as he picked up his chopsticks. Grandpa, I have an idea. Why don't we eat instant noodles? Drinking wine and eating instant noodles is delicious, right? What do you think? Guan Xin suddenly stood up. I haven't had instant noodles in a long time. Why don't we throw away all the dishes? Chapter 300. Absolutely disgusting. What the hell are you doing, Xin? There's so much good food here, why are you eating instant noodles? Xuemin was getting a little pissed off. Lin Yi was a guest he'd invited. Even if the two of them knew each other or had some sort of conflict, there was no need to be like this. Guan Xin stuck her tongue out, a little embarrassed. Do you want instant noodles, Lin Yi? I'm fine. Lin Yi was a little puzzled. Why was Guan Xin so insistent on him eating instant noodles? He didn't want to turn her down either, so he answered without thinking. That's great. I like it too. I'll go make 2 buckets. Guan Xin was a little happy at Lin Yi's answer. I'll go right now. Guan Xin, sit there. Xuemin was so angry that he didn't even bother calling her Xin anymore, choosing to just call her by her full name. Guan Xin felt wronged but couldn't tell him the real reason. She could only sit down gloomily. If she'd known this would happen, she wouldn't have made the food so disgusting. Even if she'd just cooked it casually, it would still have been delicious. I haven't had instant noodles in a long time, I kind of miss the taste. Lin Yi smiled. Grandpa Guan, don't be mad, Guan Xin's just too passionate. Guan Xin looked at Lin Yi gratefully. She was about to poison him to death, but he was still helping her out. What a nice guy. Yeah, he wouldn't have taken a bullet for her if he wasn't a nice guy, and he wouldn't have risked his life to save her today. Girls in their prime always liked to fantasize about having a Prince Charming by their side. It was the dream of every girl her age, and it was obvious that Lin Yi wasn't as good as she thought he was. But Guan Xen had taken it upon herself to make Lin Yi her Prince Charming. In fact, it was very simple for Lin Yi to block the bullet. No matter who was behind him, he just didn't want to hurt the innocent. Even if it wasn't Guan Xen who was kidnapped, Lin Yi would have done it if it was anyone else he was familiar with. If Guan Xen knew that Lin Yi acted so quickly in exchange for a kiss from Tang Yun, what would she think? Looking at his granddaughter's grateful expression towards Lin Yi, Xiumin was even more surprised this time. These two didn't seem to have a conflict, did they? What kind of relationship was that? Why is Xinxin acting so weird today? Lin Yi actually cooperated? Alright, let's not talk so much. Since you're familiar with it, let's eat it. I'll go first. Guan Xiumin picked up a piece of sweet and sour fish with his chopsticks. Guan Xian wanted to stop him, but it was too late. She could only grimace and wait for her grandpa's scolding. This fish is very tender, not bad. Guan Xiumin's eyes widened as he spat out the fish in his mouth. He gasped, "What's in it?" "I have my old life." Xiumin thought that the fish was soft and tasty when it first entered his mouth, but the next moment, a wave of spiciness rushed to his nostrils and almost made him cry. "Grandpa, I'm sorry." Guan Xen hurriedly passed a bottle of water to Xiumin. "I accidentally knocked over the mustard." "Knocked over the mustard?" Xiumin took a sip of water to catch his breath. "Then why did you bring it here? Didn't you kill Grandpa?" "I said I was going to cook it again." "Grandpa, you didn't let me," Guan Xen said carefully. "Alright. Forget it, we'll pass on the sweet and sour fish. Have Auntie Lu take it away, we'll eat something else." Xiumin waved his hand helplessly. I'm sorry, I made a fool of myself in front of you. Come, let's eat something else." Xen isn't usually like this. She might have been a bit careless when she heard that a handsome young man like you was coming. "She's pretty good at cooking, why don't you try some?" Lin Yi looked oddly at the sweet and sour fish Auntie Lu was taking away. Knocked over the mustard? Lin Yi picked up his chopsticks and picked up a piece of stir-fried pork with bamboo shoots. He was just about to eat when Guan Xen said, "Wait?" Lin Yi turned to Guan Xen. "Let's just eat instant noodles," Guan Xen said weakly. Lin Yi had a rough idea of what was going on by now. He stuffed the bamboo shoot into his mouth. It was very salty. Lin Yi picked up a few dishes closer to him and tasted them. They were either too sweet or too spicy. None of them were tasty. "What do you think? Not bad, right?" Guan Xiumin, on the other hand, was waiting for Lin Yi's praise. As long as he had Lin Yi's appetite, he wouldn't have to worry about Lin Yi stopping by to discuss medical matters with him. "It's not bad." Lin Yi smiled bitterly. Xiumin paused. Wasn't Lin Yi's expectations a bit too high? And this was just not bad? Which of his old friends didn't praise his granddaughter Xian's cooking? Even their children and grandchildren were shameless enough to come here for free meals. His granddaughter was hailed as the invincible beauty goddess of cooking in the family quarters. But since it was Lin Yi who said it, Xiumin couldn't argue with him. After all, Lin Yi was his teacher now. "Hai, your taste is pretty high. This old man thinks it's not bad already," Xiumin said as he picked up another dish. "High taste? That's high." Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He'd already made up his mind by saying that it was okay, but he'd said something against his will. Xiumin spat out a mouthful of stir-fried pork with bamboo shoots. He quickly drank a mouthful of water and said, Xen, did you kill the salt cellar?" Guan Xen lowered her head in embarrassment, not daring to look at her grandpa and Lin Yi. Today was too embarrassing. Xiumin quickly tried a few other dishes with his chopsticks and spat them out again. He finally understood that Lin Yi's not bad was already praising today's food. Today's food couldn't even be described as bad. It was unbelievably bad. Xen, this food. Xiumin's eyes widened. "You don't usually cook like this." Grandpa Guan, maybe Xen was frightened today. Lin Yi wanted to say a few words to comfort Guan Xen, but she cut him off. Guan Xen didn't want her grandpa to know what happened at the hospital today. It'd make him worry, so she cut Lin Yi off and said her real purpose. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I actually did it on purpose." "On purpose? You made it this bad on purpose? What's going on?" Xiumin blinked, not expecting Guan Xen to say that. Chapter 301. Xin's bias. I think he wouldn't want to come back after tasting my cooking. He's afraid of being poisoned. Guan Xin explained sheepishly. Lin Yi had more or less guessed Guan Xin's intentions. Guan Xuemin had praised his granddaughter to Lin Yi more than once, saying that she was a good cook and a well-mannered person. Lin Yi naturally understood the old man's intentions. Guan Xuemin, on the other hand, must have told Guan Xin something similar back at home as well. It was only natural that Guan Xin was conflicted. Any girl wouldn't be too happy if they were told that a handsome young man was coming to their house, asking them to get to know him better. Guan Xuemin was pissed off. This was the first time he'd lost face. Lin Yi is my guest. How could you do this? It's fine if you guys know each other, but if it were someone you don't know, they'd be slamming the door and walking out already. How is this treating someone to a meal? You're trying to poison him to death. I'm sorry, Grandpa. Guan Xin lowered her head, realizing that she'd gone too far. She hadn't thought too much about it before. She'd only wanted the young man to leave as soon as possible. Now that she thought about it, where would her grandpa's face go? It's fine, Grandpa Guan. Don't blame Guan Xin. Lin Yi smiled. Actually, to tell you the truth, you kept telling me how good your granddaughter was, and I didn't even dare to visit you. It's normal for Guan Xin to feel the same way. Is that so? So I'm the one worrying too much then? Guan Xuemin thought about it for a moment. It seemed like he'd been a little too hasty, so he shook his head. Alright, let Auntie Lu make a few dishes. I'll go. Guan Xin stood up, a little embarrassed. It was a bit of a shame that all the dishes on the table were picked up, but it wasn't something a normal person could eat. Lin Yi changed the topic to medicine, and Guan Xuemin quickly forgot about the previous unpleasantness. He excitedly discussed the prescription with Lin. Guan Xuemin had completely forgotten what had happened when Guan Xin brought a few steaming hot dishes to the table. Xin, come pour Grandpa some wine. Guan Xin looked at Lin Yi suspiciously. Was this man really that mysterious? Not only was he skilled, but he also knew medicine. It wasn't easy for a person to receive such high praise from his grandfather. Guan Xin's subsequent dishes were quite ordinary. A plate of scrambled eggs with green onions, a plate of mushrooms, a plate of tofu, a plate of cucumber, and a bowl of sour and spicy egg soup were all served piping hot. 4 ordinary home-cooked dishes and an ordinary soup were cooked to perfection in Guan Xin's hands. Try it again this time. Guan Xin said to Lin Yi, a little embarrassed as she poured wine for her grandfather. Lin Yi nodded and picked up a piece of mushrooms with his chopsticks. He thought to himself. He's actually catching up to my level? How is it? Guan Xin didn't know if Lin Yi's ek was good or bad. She looked at Lin Yi nervously, waiting for his answer. But for these home-cooked dishes, Guan Xin had given it her all, bringing out the young divine chef's abilities to the extreme. I didn't think home-cooked food could be this good. Lin Yi praised. Old Lin always praised him like this. Then, eat more. Guan Xin was a little happy. She pursed her lips into a smile. Try something else. Wait. Lin Yi nodded and put a few more mouthfuls from the other dishes into his mouth. Grandpa Guan, I finally know that what you said before was true. Guan Xin really is the young divine chef. That's right. Guan Xuemin nodded. So, if you want to eat more, you'll have to come here often. No problem. Lin Yi nodded happily. Xuemin had a taste of Guan Xin's new dishes, frowning as he took a bite. Xin, aren't you being biased? I've tried these dishes before. Why aren't they as good as today's? It looks like Lin Yi's treatment is different now that he's here. The poison dishes from before are upgraded to delicious food that even I've never tasted before. Grandpa. Guan Xin was a little embarrassed by Xuemin's words. Yi, it looks like you'll have to come more often. This old man will have to enjoy the delicious food with you. Guan Xuemin smiled. I'll definitely come more often. Lin Yi nodded. He was here because of Guan Xuemin's invitation, but also because he wanted to discuss the medical company with Guan Xuemin. If that were to happen, he'd have to come here more often. Guan Xin was a little embarrassed as she looked at Lin Yi. She was a little surprised but also a little lost. It seemed like she had a chance again. If he came here more often, then their relationship would definitely improve. But, was this the right thing to do? After dinner, Guan Exin went to clean up the dishes while Lin Yi and Guan Xuemin went upstairs to Guan Xuemin's study. Lin Yi's expression returned to a serious one as he closed the door. Grandpa Guan, I actually have something important to discuss with you this time. Oh? What is it? Guan Xuemin paused. He didn't think that Lin Yi would have something to discuss with him. He'd originally wanted to discuss the condition of Lu Tiany's father, Lu Zhenhu, with Lin Yi. Guan Xuemin could barely control Lu Zhenhu's angina, but couldn't cure it. So he wanted to discuss it with Lin Yi and see if there was anything he could come up with. But since Lin Yi had something to discuss, he'd talk about Lin Yi first. Grandpa Guan, I'd like to start a medical company and sell some Chinese medicine. Lin Yi got straight to the point. I'd like to borrow your title as Miracle Dr. Guan. You want to start a medical company? Guan Xuemin paused, but didn't really care about what Lin Yi said. There's a lot of medical companies in the country right now. If I don't have any special medicine, I won't be able to make much of an impact with just my name alone. If Dr. Kong can use Golden Creation to become one of the top medical companies in the country, why can't we? Lin Yi smiled nonchalantly. He has Golden Creation so we can make rejuvenation pill and blood clotting powder. There are a lot of similar names in wuxia novels anyways. Oh? Guan Xuemin paused. You have the recipe for Golden Creation? Chapter 302. The problem of funding. Guan Xuemin looked at Lin Yi in shock. The formula for Golden Creation had always been a top secret in the industry. No one knew about it, and while many pharmaceutical companies had paid a high price to hire Eastern physicians to do research on it, no one had been able to find the formula. But Lin Yi had a formula with similar effects? But when he thought about Lin Yi's painkiller formula, Guan Xuemin didn't doubt that Lin Yi was just joking. If he said it existed, then it definitely existed. If he said it worked, then it worked. Guan Xuemin had no doubt about that. If there really is, then with the painkiller prescription in our hands, we'll be able to compete with Miracle Dr. Kong on equal footing with these two products. Guan Xuemin nodded. He wasn't interested in business, but he was very interested in Lin Yi's formula. Grandpa Guan, I'll use my formula to buy shares, and I'll borrow your name to start a pharmaceutical company. Are you interested? Lin Yi spoke his mind. Lin Yi had a general understanding of Guan Xuemin through their few interactions. The man didn't care much for fame and fortune and had almost no desire for it. Prescriptions, on the other hand, were very important to him. It wasn't that he wanted the formula for himself, but that he wanted to study the properties of the formula. You can use my name for free. Guan Xuemin waved a hand. I don't lack food or clothes, so money is useless to me. But do you know how much money it takes to start a pharmaceutical company? We have to get our hands on the formula, and we can't hire other factories to do it for us. We'll need a production line as well, and we'll need at least 100 million to start the company. 100 million? Lin Yi didn't have any experience in business, so he paused. That's a bit much. Do you have the money, Elder Guan? I'll take a smaller share. 100 million wasn't much to the Lin Yi of the past. Although the old man lied to him and said that a mission was only a few hundred yuan, Lin Yi knew very well that there were many missions worth more than 100 million yuan. However, Lin Yi did not want to haggle with his stingy old man. The old man was the one who had raised him. There was no need for him to haggle with him so clearly. But now Lin Yi was really short of money. He knew that without money he couldn't do anything. My money, other than enough for my daily expenses, has basically been donated to the medical industry. Xuemin smiled. You know that at my level I don't need to spend much money. The school basically covers all my daily expenses. Lin Yi was in a bit of a dilemma. It seemed that his thinking was a bit too simple. He thought that he could make money with the formula, but he didn't think about the startup capital. If it was an investment, Lin Yi could pull it in. He could talk to Ping Zhan about the prospects of this industry. He was sure that the guy would be interested, but his company's internal problems weren't solved yet. Lin Yi didn't want to give the formula to a company he had no confidence in. It wasn't that Lin Yi didn't trust Ping Zhan, but the problem was that the company might not even belong to Ping Zhan in the future. Even if it did belong to Ping Zhan, those bastard shareholders of the company were even capable of assassinating Meng Yao. There was no telling if they'd be jealous of the recipe or not. My eldest son does have the money, but I won't use it. Xuemin continued after seeing that Lin Yi wasn't saying anything. He's a bit greedy. We can't let him participate in this. Linny paused. He wasn't expecting Xuemin to say that. Normally, people would think of their children first when there was something good, but Xuemin had rejected the possibility of letting his eldest son participate. He already has enough money to spend. I don't want to hurt him. My youngest son, Xinxin's father, is running a temporary business. He does have some money on hand, but his company isn't very big. I estimate that the total value of the entire business is only 200 to 300 million. He doesn't have that much liquid capital. So I don't want either of them to participate in this. I'm still healthy, so it's not a big deal. But in the future. Xuemin didn't continue, but he believed that Lin Yi would understand what he was trying to say. Indeed, Lin Yi understood Xuemin's words. Lin Yi was shocked. He knew that Xuemin was a righteous old man who didn't care about fame and fortune, but he didn't think that the guy would be this insightful. He'd removed his 2 family members from the equation as soon as Lin Yi mentioned the idea of a partnership. It's not a problem to give them some shares. Lin Yi said, a little embarrassed. No need. Xuemin shook his head. Don't talk about them. I don't even want the shares. Lin Yi was stunned. How can you do that? How can I borrow your reputation? You brat. Let me finish. Xuemin didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Lin Yi's words. I haven't finished yet. Okay, Grandpa Guan, go ahead. Lin Yi was familiar with Xuemin now, so he wasn't as restrained as before. In fact, the two of them had become good friends since the last time they talked about medical problems. Xian is my favorite granddaughter. If it's possible, you can just give her a small part of the shares. Xuemin said, it doesn't need to be much, just enough for her to live in the future. Of course, that's not a problem. Lin Yi agreed without hesitation. Don't be in a hurry to agree. You still have to think of a way to start your own business. Xuemin said solemnly with a wave of his hand. My name is useful in all the big houses and I can pull in a lot of investments, but you better not let anyone else have a share in this medicine company. House Kang's Golden Creations profits are enough to make people jealous, but there's nothing we can do about it. They're managing it like a family and no outsiders are involved. Xuemin continued. As long as Elder Kong is still alive, there won't be any problems. But if someone else were to get involved in your company, I can't guarantee that my name will still be effective in the face of profit. I understand, Grandpa Guan. I'll think of a way to get the funds myself. Lin Yi nodded. Xuemin didn't say anything else. 100 million seemed like a fantasy to an ordinary person, but he knew that Lin Yi wasn't an ordinary person. How could Huaijuan's teammate, someone with such miraculous medical skills, be an ordinary person? Chapter 303. The Young Miracle Doctor. It's useless. Lin Yi waved his hand, not looking at the patient. Since it's your patient, Grandpa Guan, I'll take a look with you. All right. I'll call him and ask him to come over. Guan Xuemin nodded. Lin Yi was right, seeing the patient wasn't as direct as looking at the patient. Having Lin Yi with Elder Lu was much better than doing research on his own. The patient's nearby? Lin Yi asked, surprised. Yeah, he lives in this district. It's only a few minutes' drive, it'll be quick. With that, Guan Xuemin picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a number. In the family compound of Songshan Medical University was a luxurious villa that was comparable to Guan Xuemin's mansion. A young man in his 20s was talking angrily to a middle-aged woman. Auntie, isn't Sun Jingyi looking down on House Wu a little too much by doing this? We're a Wulin house after all, and we're one of the 4 great guardian houses. What's House Sun? They're just a new house and I'm already giving them a lot of face by asking for their hand in marriage. But that old man's son doesn't know what's good for him, saying that he doesn't want to get involved in young people's affairs, telling me to work hard on my own. The speaker was Wu Qintian, the most promising young man in House Wu's younger generation. He was known as Little Wu Iron Fist. House Sun's business has been expanding really fast these past few years, and they have some connections in the political world. They're a new house, yes, but they have the right to stand shoulder to shoulder with the other old houses. Lu Tianyi said, glaring at his nephew. But Sun Jingyi and I are childhood friends and she's gone too far. She found a boyfriend in private and made me look like a fool. Qintian said resentfully. I wouldn't have lost my wallet if it wasn't for her. People look down on me. All right. Then I'll help you. Wu Huiru opened her mouth. Since your uncle's father will be staying here to recuperate for a while, I'll help you set up a company. Let's show that girl from the Sun family the talents of the Wu family's men. Thank you, Auntie. Chintian was overjoyed. He didn't know what to do in this unfamiliar city, but with his aunt's help he'd be able to make a name for himself and show Sun Jingyi how good he was. Ring. The phone in the living room rang. It's so late, who's calling? Tanny Huiru? What if it disturbs Dad's rest? Wu Huiru complained when she heard the phone ringing. What if something happens? Tanny glared at Huiru. Huiru. This landline phone was in the previous villa. He must have called the previous owner by mistake. Wu Huiru curled her lips. Who doesn't call this phone when they know us? That's right, Uncle. And he's right. Don't worry about him. Chintian was in the middle of a happy conversation with his aunt, preparing to think about how to capture Sun Jingyi's heart after setting up the company, when the phone interrupted them. Lu Tianyi frowned, ignoring his wife and nephew. Hello, I'm Lu Tianyi. Tianyi. I'm Guan Xuemin. Bring your father over. I've invited a specialist and we're going to see if there's any possibility of a cure. Xuemin's voice came from the other side of the phone. All right. Elder Guan, I'll bring my father over right now. Thank you. Lu Tianyi nodded profusely at the words. Lu Tianyi was very grateful that Xuemin was putting so much effort into his father's situation. After all, House Lu was one of the most powerful houses in the city, but that was only because old Lu Zhenhu was still alive. Many people gave them face, but once old Lu passed away, House Lu would definitely fall. Tianyi glared at his wife after hanging up. You almost ruined our big plan, you know. Elder Guan's invited a specialist and he's going to treat Dad. Would you be able to take responsibility if you didn't get the call? I'll go help Dad down right now. Huiru didn't dare say anything else. She lowered her head and went upstairs. Lu Tianyi had become more and more manly these days, and Huiru didn't dare make a fuss anymore. Instead she became more obedient. Careful. Lu Tianyi warned. Chintian, go with me to help your grandpa Lu down. Huiru gave Chintian a look. Old Lu was a big shot, and if he fell in love with Chintian and spoke up for Chintian at House Sun, old Sun wouldn't just give him face. Chintian understood and followed his aunt upstairs. 10 minutes later, old Lu Zhenhu came down with the help of Huiru and Chintian. Lu Tianyi had already parked the car in front of the villa, waiting for them to get in before driving straight to Xuemin's villa. Zhenhu was no longer sleepy after hearing that a specialist was coming to treat him. His heart was filled with hope. Even an old man in his 70s would want to live a few more years. It wasn't that Zhenhu was afraid of death, but that he couldn't let go of the Lius. Auntie Lu opened the door for them and invited the Lius into the villa. Xuemin and Lin Yi were waiting on the sofa in the living room, but Lin Yi paused when he saw Zhenhu and Lu Tianyi. He didn't expect the patient Xuemin was talking about to be Zhenhu. Lu Tianyi's family also saw Lin Yi on the sofa. They paused as well, but Zhenhu and Lu Tianyi's faces lit up with excitement. Xuemin had found this miracle doctor. Did that mean that his father's illness could be cured? But Chintian's face was very ugly. He didn't expect to see Lin Yi here, nor did he expect Lin Yi to be sitting with Miracle Dr. Guan, who was treating Grandpa Lu. He wanted to say something but held it in. This wasn't House Wu or House Lu after all, and it wasn't his place to speak. He could only look at Lin Yi with hatred. Miracle Doctor. I didn't expect to see you here, it's great. Lu Tianyi was a little excited as he walked up to shake Lin Yi's hand. Lu Tianyi regretted it when he heard Xuemin praise Lin Yi so much. He was in too much of a rush that day, and he didn't leave his contact number with Lu Tianyi. Chapter 304. This kid is a little annoying. Lu Tianyi felt a little awkward. Who was he? Many people tried to get on his good side and he'd taken the initiative to shake hands with Lin Yi. Now that he was being ignored, he felt a little embarrassed. But, if Lin Yi really was as miraculous as Guan Xuemin said, then it was normal for a miracle doctor to put on airs. He was someone many people wanted to get on his good side after all. It was normal that he didn't like him. Uncle. Don't get tricked by him. I know this kid, he's not a miracle doctor. Chintian was getting angry at his uncle's respect for Lin Yi. He's Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. A liar. Chintian found it hard to connect the title of miracle doctor with Lin Yi. The kid didn't look like a miracle doctor at all, and he'd asked Sun Jingyi about what Lin Yi did for a living. Sun Jingyi tried her best to cover it up, But Chintian still got the gist of it. The kid didn't have a proper job and was unemployed. Otherwise, with Sun Jingyi's personality, there was no way she wouldn't brag about her boyfriend's good points. If Lin Yi really was a miracle doctor, Sun Jingyi would have used this to attack him already. Why would she hide it? This was why Chintian dared to make things difficult for Lin Yi. As far as he was concerned, Lin Yi was no miracle doctor. These people must have been tricked by Lin Yi. Lu Tianyi, Huiru and Guan Xumin all looked at Lin Yi, surprised. Fine, I'm a liar. What no one expected was for Lin Yi to admit it. Since there are people who don't want to see me, then I'll take my leave. Grandpa Guan, I'll come visit again. With that, Lin Yi stood up and prepared to leave. What a joke, Lin Yi didn't owe the Lius anything. He only treated Elder Lu because of Guan Xumin, and since they called him a liar, Lin Yi couldn't be bothered to explain himself. I'm too lazy to treat you if you call me a liar. Go look wherever you want, we'll meet again. Haze. Guan Xumin sighed. He wasn't angry at Lin Yi's actions, but he didn't like Chintian's behavior. He didn't know what relationship this kid had with Lu Tianyi. Why did he bring him here to embarrass himself? Great, now that you've pissed him off, he won't treat your old man anymore. What are you going to do now? In terms of age, Chintian was a few years older than Lin Yi, but in Xuemin's eyes, Chintian was just a kid. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was his old friend, his teacher. Lin Yi walked towards the entrance of the villa without any hesitation. Guan Xuemin didn't stop him. Lu Tianyi was stunned for a moment, but then he panicked. They had finally found Lin Yi. How could they let him go just like that? Lu Tianyi couldn't care less about his identity. He stepped forward and grabbed Lin Yi. Little magic doctor, please wait. Why should I stay? Lin Yi pursed his lips. What if someone calls me a liar? Pa. Lu Tianyi slapped Huiru's face. He may be Chintian's uncle, but Chintian was still a member of House Wu, and a rising star of the younger generation at that. He couldn't discipline him directly, so he vented his anger on his wife, who was also a Wu. It was natural for a man to discipline his wife. Even if the Wu family knew about it, they wouldn't say anything. After Wu Huiru married into the Lu family, she would be a member of the Lu family. Look at your nephew, what did you do? What did you do? Tianyi roared, frustrated. You're the perfect example of a loving aunt ruining her nephew. Huiru was stunned by Tianyi's sudden slap, but she realized that she shouldn't have brought Chintian with her when she regained her composure. She'd pissed off the little miracle doctor, and if the brothers of House Lu found out about it, they'd all divorce her as their sister-in-law. Pa. Huiru slapped Chintian's face. What nonsense are you talking about? If you keep this up, I'll call my brother and tell you to go home. Chintian didn't dare say anything after being slapped by his aunt. There were many rules in a big family, and it was natural for the elders to discipline the younger ones. Chintian lowered his head and focused all his hatred on Lin Yi. As far as he was concerned, all of this was because of Lin Yi. Little magic doctor, you see. Lu Tianyi had already made his stance as he looked at Lin Yi with pleading eyes. Yes, pleading. Curing his father's illness was his biggest wish. Oh, this kid's a bit annoying. I don't want to see him anymore. Lin Yi glanced at Chintian. Huiru, why aren't you taking Chintian out? Lu Tianyi glared at Huiru. Why was she so insensible? You can see that the little magic doctor hates your nephew. Why don't you make him disappear from the doctor's sight? Oh, okay. Huiru pushed Chintian. Let's go out first. Chintian humphed, unsatisfied. He looked at Lin Yi viciously and mouthed, just you wait, before leaving the villa with Huiru. Lin Yi didn't even look at Chintian. Who cared what he said? There were many people who wanted to humiliate him, but none of them got what they wanted. Of course, that was unless his old man could torture him to the point where he couldn't do anything about it. Little divine doctor, that disappointing kid has already been driven out by me. Can you treat my father now? Lu Tianyi asked carefully as he looked at Lin Yi. Did I say I'm going to treat your father? Lin Yi looked at Lu Tianyi. Was there something wrong with this guy's head? When did he say he was going to treat his father? That's... Tianyi's face froze as he groaned inwardly. Indeed, Lin Yi never promised to treat his father. He only said he hated Chintian. Little magic doctor, can you please take a look at my father? Previously, if my nephew had offended you, I apologize on his behalf. It wasn't easy to make Lu Tianyi humble himself like this. But he really did put all his hopes on Lin Yi. After seeing Lin Yi's miraculous skills with his own eyes, plus Xuemin's respect for Lin Yi, Lu Tianyi didn't doubt that Lin Yi was the real deal. If it were anyone else, even a miracle doctor, Lu Tianyi wouldn't act like this. But Lu Tianyi didn't dare underestimate this young man who was called its specialist by Guan Xuemin and miracle Dr. Guan. Especially with Lin Yi's temper. It was normal for powerful people to have a temper, and Lu Tianyi understood that. He was sure that Lin Yi was a master. Chapter 305. A rip-off. The crowd went into an uproar at Lin Yi's words. Even Guan Xuemin was staring at Lin Yi in shock. Elder Lu could live for another 8 to 10 years if he could keep his condition under control, but that was under the condition that the angina wouldn't act up again. An old man at Jinhu's age would be at the end of his rope after another 8 to 10 years. Even Hua Tuo himself wouldn't be able to change his fate. And this, how could it be said that even if he was cured, it would all be for naught? Sickness and death were part and parcel of human nature. It was normal for descendants to die 8 to 10 years later. Haha. Young man, you're right. In another 8 to 10 years I'll be buried. That's only natural. However, if you can let this old man not be tormented by illness in these few years, this old man will be eternally grateful. Jinhu was no longer afraid of death at his age, and Lin Yi wasn't wrong. Most importantly, Jinhu knew very well that this daughter-in-law of his had offended Lin Yi from the start, and her nephew had offended Lin Yi as well. Would he still be able to treat him? Treat? For your sake I'll reluctantly do it, but there'll be a fee. The only person Lin Yi had a good impression of was Elder Lu. No matter what, the old man knew how to repay kindness. He'd even invited Lin Yi to Yanjing a while back, so Lin Yi had a good impression of him. Still, Lin Yi wasn't in a good mood if he agreed to treat just like that, so he came up with a compromise. A fee? Not a problem. Lu Tianyi nodded quickly after hearing Lin Yi's terms. It was only right and proper to pay for treatment, so Lu Tianyi had no objections. Excuse me, young miracle doctor. How much does it cost? 10 million a year. Lin Yi said. Takes a year to cure? But 10 million. Right, no problem. Lu Tianyi hesitated for a moment, but he still nodded. Although 10 million was not a small number, it was nothing compared to his father's health. Are you sick? Lin Yi frowned after listening to Lu Tianyi's words. I said 10 million a year, not a total of 10 million. Ah. Lu Tianyi was stunned and his heart was burning with anger. He also guessed that Lin Yi might be taking advantage of his misfortune, but there was nothing he could do. He had directly offended Lin Yi, and it was almost impossible to make Lin Yi relent. He didn't dare to show his dissatisfaction because if he did, Lin Yi might not treat him even if he offered money. Then how much does it cost? Didn't I just say it? He can still live for 8 to 10 years. Don't you know how to calculate it yourself? Lin Yi looked at Lu Tianyi with disdain. Then, isn't that 80 million? Lu Tianyi was shocked. This was really a large number. 80 million? Lin Yi couldn't help but be amused. Well, if you want your old man to suddenly get sick after 8 years, then 80 million. Anyway, if he doesn't die after 8 years, he will definitely die when the disease breaks out. This. Lu Tianyi couldn't help but smile bitterly after listening to Lin Yi's words. Lin Yi seems to want 100 million from me. If it's 100 million, then it's better to say it clearly. It seems that I am reluctant to spend money on my father. He can't guarantee that his father can only live for 8 years. According to what Lin Yi said, 80 million is only for 8 years. If he suddenly dies after 8 years, then he is not a filial son. Guan Xuemin also understood at this moment, and his expression was a little strange. He just told Lin Yi that there is no startup capital, and now the startup capital is here? Lin Yi really extorted a lot of money. Although Guan Xuemin knew that Lin Yi was just using this as a pretext to make a fuss, who asked the Lu family to offend Lin Yi. Guan Xuemin didn't say anything. In this situation, it was not appropriate for him to interrupt. Elder Guan, you see. Lu Tianyi was a little helpless. If it was 10 million he could take it out immediately, but if it was 100 million he also had to plan. Isn't it a little too much? Therefore he wanted Guan Xuemin to help him. Mr. Lu, you really overestimate me. Guan Xuemin shook his head. My relationship with Lin Yi can only be regarded as a teacher and a friend. I can't interfere with him or anything. A teacher and a friend? That's half a teacher if you ask. Tianyi paused a little helplessly. I'll be honest with you, House Lu is a big house, but it'd be hard for us to take out 100 million in cash. What would you ask your teacher to do? Guan Xuemin smiled bitterly. Lu Tianyi was stunned, not understanding what Guan Xuemin was saying. Lil Yi is half a teacher to me. Guan Xuemin didn't feel embarrassed at all. Xuemin didn't feel embarrassed at all. He was a man of honor and he respected Lin Yi's medical skills. He wouldn't hide anything just because he was afraid of losing face. What? Lu Tianyi was shocked and looked at Lin Yi in disbelief. Guan Xuemin actually said that Lin Yi is his teacher? How is that possible? However, Lu Tianyi was a person who had seen the world and he immediately understood. Yes, even Guan Xuemin couldn't do anything about his father's illness, so how could his student do anything? The only possibility was that Lin Yi was better than Guan Xuemin. That's all I have to say. Guan Xuemin waved his hand. I've already introduced Lil Yi to you, and it's up to you whether you want to treat him or not. But don't worry, even if you don't take out the 100 million, I will still do my best. If possible, I will ask Lil Yi for help. 100 million, okay? No problem. Having figured out the relationship between Lin Yi and Guan Xuemin, Lu Tianyi agreed without hesitation. Although it was difficult for the Lu family to take out 100 million in cash, they could sell off some of their stocks in real estate to get the amount. As the core figure of the Lu family, his father couldn't be harmed. As long as his father was healthy and alive, the Lu family had hope. Alright, call me when you have the money ready. Lin Yi nodded and got straight to the point. You can find me if you want to talk to Grandpa Guan. I'll be going now, it's getting late. Alright, Miracle Dr. Lin, do you need me to send you off? Lu Tianyi had already thrown caution to the wind. It was only 100 million, right? Compared to his father's health, it really wasn't much. House Lu was different from other rising houses, and the reason why they were doing so well was because of Lu Zhenhu's connections and reputation. Lu Tianyi wanted to send Lin Yi off because he wanted to know where Lin Yi lived. He wasn't worried about the 100 million anymore, he was worried that Lin Yi would go back on his word. Chapter 306. Parting on bad terms, alright. Xuemin nodded. Be careful on the road. You've been drinking, so if you're driving, I've been awake for a while now. Do I look drunk to you, Grandpa Guan? Lin Yi smiled. Drinking? Lin Yi rarely got drunk. Ever since he started practicing the art of dragon mastery, Lin Yi's tolerance for alcohol had increased as well. The old man at home often dragged Lin Yi to drink with him, but it was always old Lin who was completely drunk after the drinks, while Lin Yi was completely fine. Old Lin was quite annoyed by this. Drinking with someone who couldn't get drunk wasn't fun at all. In the end, old Lin stopped allowing Lin Yi to drink, telling him to drink plain water instead. The reason was simple. He thought Lin Yi was wasting alcohol, and since drinking was the same as drinking water, he might as well drink water instead. Xuemin nodded. Lin Yi didn't look drunk at all. What he'd done to House Lu just now was enough to make them lose their temper. After Lin Yi left, Lu Tianyi let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly at Xuemin. Elder Guan, I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. After all, Lu Tianyi had come to Xuemin for treatment. Now that he'd switched to Lin Yi, it was a little disrespectful. While Lin Yi had been introduced by Xuemin, Lu Tianyi still had to explain himself. He'd been too polite to Lin Yi earlier, and he was worried that Xuemin might have some ulterior motives. Lin Yi was a miracle doctor, but so was Xuemin. Lu Tianyi didn't want to offend him. Xuemin waved his hand. I don't have the ability, but I hope my patient can get better. Did you guys know Lin Yi before? He's the one who saved my father's life I told you about last time. Lu Tianyi explained. So, this is why I believe that he can cure my father's illness. Alright, heaven wings. Zhenhu spoke up at this time. When you raise money, give Professor Guan an extra 2 million. Okay, Dad. Lu Tianyi quickly nodded. Forget about my consultation fee. I didn't cure your illness. Guan Xuemin waved his hand and was about to refuse. No matter what, you've helped me for so many days. You should give me the money. Zhenhu said. In his eyes, Xuemin's referral fee was acceptable. Alright then, I'll accept it. Xuemin thought about it. He'd just gotten 100 million from Lin Yi, but he'd opened a company and might need more money. 2 million was good enough, and so he accepted the money. After a few more words, Lu Tianyi stood up and left. It was getting late and Xuemin seemed to have drunk quite a bit. He didn't want to disturb his rest. On the way back, Huiru heard that Lin Yi had asked for 100 million. He was shocked. House Wu was a powerful house, but they were still one of those hidden houses that specialized in ancient martial arts. They didn't have many industries, and 100 million was enough to last them for a few years. Uncle, that Lin Yi is a liar. He's Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. How could he be a miracle doctor? Don't let him trick you. Chen Tian was pissed off at Lin Yi's demand. If he let Lin Yi get 100 million, how was he going to compete with Lin Yi? Sun Jingyi wouldn't even look at him in the eye when the time came, and the funny thing was that this was all caused by his uncle's family. Wu Chen Tian, what are you talking about? What do you know? Shut up. Lu Tianyi was angry at his nephew for being so immature. Don't you think you've caused enough trouble? You've already offended Miracle Dr. Lin. Do you want to kill your grandpa Lu? Uncle, I'm doing this for your own good. If you don't want to listen, then forget it. I won't bother you anymore. Chen Tian's stubborn young master's temper flared up. He was the most promising of the younger generation in House Wu, the one who had the highest chance of reaching Mystic in Iron Fist arts, so he was respected everywhere in the house. He had never been humiliated like this before. Don't be rash. Apologize to your uncle. Huiru was panicking and quickly pulled Chen Tian's hand. Apologize. Chen Tian smiled coldly. And since uncle looks down on House Wu, then forget it. Do you want to come back with me or stay here? Tian, stop it. Huiru didn't expect Chen Tian to be this angry. All right, Aunt, since you're already a part of House Lu, I won't force you. Chen Tian's eyes flashed with determination. Stop the car, I'm getting off. Lu Tianyi naturally wouldn't let Chen Tian do as he pleased. He stopped the car by the roadside and smiled coldly. Since this Wu kid didn't know what was good for him, then he shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. Other things were fine, but his father's illness was involved. He wouldn't be nice to Chen Tian. House Wu, even if he was from House Wu, he was just a junior. How dare he be so arrogant in front of him? Lu Tianyi was furious. Huiru, you're going back with him? I won't be messing around with Tian anymore. Huiru sighed helplessly. She knew that from today onwards, there would be a rift between House Wu and House Lu. But now that she was a daughter-in-law of House Lu, she had to stand on House Lu's side. This was the foundation of being a wife. She'd be laughed at if she messed around with House Wu. She wanted to mediate, but she didn't know how. It was normal for Chen Tian to be angry, but Lin Yi was Sun Jingyi's boyfriend. That alone was enough for Chen Tian to not be nice to him. But Lin Yi was someone who could save his father-in-law, and this wasn't going to be easy to mediate. Huiru, go and send him off. He's your nephew after all. Jinhu, who hadn't spoken until now, spoke up. He didn't want to say anything about House Wu's business. As the head of House Lu, he couldn't interfere with House Wu's business. What happened to House Wu's nephew would be handled by House Wu, and it wasn't up to others to say anything. Is Dad? Huiru nodded and sent Chen Tian off the car. She whispered after 2 steps, Tian, don't do anything rash. That Lin Yi's really good at medicine. And you're helping him too? Chen Tian humphed unhappily. If you want to deal with him, at least wait until he heals my father-in-law's illness. To be honest, I'm really pissed off that he's asking for so much. If you can get that 100 million back for me, I'm sure Uncle would be happy to see it too. Huiru said softly. He waited for him to finish, remaining silent for a while. Dad, look. Peijan felt exhausted. A third of the board had been roped in by Gubong, and even he, the chairman, couldn't stop this. Since Gubong was calling for this meeting, it meant that he had the confidence to replace him as the chairman. Actually, I have long seen the problem with the company's board of directors. Elder Chu's voice was calm. Pingzhan, you're too kind and kind-hearted. That's a good point, but you have to understand that the business world is like a battlefield. Being kind to your enemy is being cruel to yourself. Everyone has greed and selfishness, and it's only natural that the board of directors would ally together to usurp power. Then you mean? Pingzhan paused. His father didn't seem to want to get involved in this anymore. Go find Lin Yi. Elder Chu sighed softly. Perhaps he's the only one who can help you in this situation. Him? Peijan was surprised. Dad, you're asking him to come, don't you mean for him and Yao Yao? He might have a way. Elder Chu didn't say it out loud, only smiling. I understand, Dad. Peijan hung up the phone. He didn't know why his father wanted him to go find Lin Yi, but he couldn't understand what Lin Yi could do in a situation like this. Lin Yi wasn't a shareholder of the company, and he didn't have any shares in his hands. Lin Yi wouldn't be able to interfere with the company's board of directors meeting, but since Elder Chu had asked him to look for Lin Yi, Peng Zhan could only give it a try. Peng Zhan really didn't expect that a business tycoon like him would fall into the trap of his father's old friend's son. Had he really been too kind? Perhaps his father was right. If he'd acted decisively when he'd first discovered the problem, perhaps this wouldn't have happened today. Some of the shareholders would have criticized him for not caring about his father's feelings, but it was still better than being at his wits' end. After some hesitation, Peng Zhan turned to Li Fu. Go to Yao Yao's villa. Yes, Mr. Chu. Faubert sighed. Mr. Chu, don't be too hasty. If Elder Chu said that Lin Yi has a way, then he should have a way. I hope so. Peng Zhan nodded. Lin Yi parked the car in front of Ming Yao's villa, and saw a Bentley turn in behind him. It was Faubert's car. Lin Yi got out of the car but didn't enter the villa. He waited for Faubert's car to park and Peng Zhan got out of the car. Peng Zhan didn't expect Lin Yi to just come back. He looked at the van Lin Yi drove, surprised. Your car? Oh, I helped Lingshan catch a fugitive, that Heibao. Lin Yi didn't hide the truth. It's Heibao's. I got the license plate from Lingshan this afternoon. Peng Zhan nodded. He didn't expect Lin Yi to have built up his own network in Songshan without anyone noticing. The fact that he was able to get the car from Lingshan meant that the two had a close relationship. Uncle Chu has something to discuss with you, Peng Zhan said with a pat on Lin Yi's shoulder. He didn't want to waste time on the car. Oh. Alright, let's talk inside. Lin Yi said as he locked the door. Peng Zhan hesitated. Why don't you get in my car? Lin Yi paused but understood immediately. He nodded. Okay. Chapter 308. Leave it to Melon Yi followed Peng Zhan into the Bentley, who lit up a cigarette and handed one to Lin Yi. Lin Yi waved his hand. I'm not addicted, I don't like smoking. Peng Zhan didn't mind as he passed it to Faubert casually. Uncle Chu's in some trouble. Peng Zhan didn't know why his old man wanted him to go look for Lin Yi, but he couldn't understand why Lin Yi would care about company matters other than protecting Meng Yao. Lin Yi didn't have any experience in this, did he? It's about the company, isn't it? Lin Yi didn't wait for Peng Zhan to finish, guessing that the only thing Peng Zhan was worried about right now was the company's business. Yes, it's about the company. Peng Zhan nodded, not hiding anything. He wasn't going to hide anything since he was looking for help. The second and third largest shareholders of the company have teamed up, and all the board members who are on good terms with them are on their side. They're planning to hold a board meeting to elect a new chairman. Peng Zhan nodded, not hiding anything. Lin Yi waved his hand. Uncle Chu, you don't have to go into the details. I don't know much about company operations, but there's one thing I want to know right now. Will these two be a threat to your position in the company? Yes, they've been in the company for years and they have a certain amount of connections. Some of the board members are on good terms with them, and I'd lose for sure if they teamed up. Peng Zhan said. Lin Yi nodded, furrowing his eyebrows as he fell into deep thought. Peng Zhan didn't disturb Lin Yi, since he'd never come into contact with company matters before. He'd need some time to digest what he'd just heard. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi asked a strange question all of a sudden. The second and third largest shareholders you mentioned, what's their relationship like before? Before? Peng Zhan paused, a little angry. From what I've seen before, their relationship wasn't that good. You know that the three major shareholders of the company, myself included, have a certain amount of power in the board of directors. There's no such thing as someone fawning over someone else, so from what I've seen, their relationship has always been tense. But I don't know why, but at the board meeting on Sunday the two of them actually teamed up. This is what caught me off guard. It turns out that the two of them have been colluding with each other. Heh. Lin Yi laughed. Uncle Chu, you're too involved. The person involved can't see clearly. Peng Zhan paused. Maybe they didn't collude with each other long ago, but only temporarily? Lin Yi shrugged and continued, of course this is just my guess. There's definitely something fishy going on. I think there's definitely a secret that no one knows about. Peng Zhan nodded, you're right, but it doesn't matter when they started working together. What's more important is how do I deal with them working together? Huh? Why deal with them? Lin Yi smiled. Uncle Chu, haven't you thought about splitting them up, making them fight amongst themselves, or even inciting them to betray you. Lin Yi hadn't run a company before, but the most common way to deal with his enemies was to divide and destroy them, or to incite internal strife and let them kill each other first. Of course, instigating defection was also a good way. Ping Zhan paused. He'd been thinking about how to deal with Jin Gubong and Xie Guangbuo's team. He'd never thought about splitting them up, inciting them to betray him, or inciting them to fight amongst themselves. Tell me about these two shareholders. Who's the leader? Lin Yi asked. Jin Gubong and Xie Guangbuo are the two major shareholders. Jin Gubong's the one I've been trying to deal with. He's the reason why Yao Yao was attacked a couple of times. I was actually planning on using the theme park incident to cause trouble for Jin Gubong during the board meeting on Sunday, but Xie Guangbuo jumped out of nowhere. With that, Peng Zhan explained the situation to Lin Yi. Old Xie doesn't speak much, nor does he fight for power. Who knew that he'd be working with Jin Gubong this time? Peng Zhan's introduction. Lin Yi had a better understanding of the two shareholders of the company. This Jin Gubong was the leader this time, and getting him to defect was basically impossible. This Xie Guangbuo that Peng Zhan was talking about was the key to solving this problem. Just as Peng Zhan had said, Xie Guangbuo's behavior was completely different from his usual self on Sunday. There had to be something fishy going on, so Lin Yi decided to start with this person. Alright, if that's the case, leave this to me, Uncle Chu. I'll take care of it. Lin Yi nodded. Where does Xie Guangbuo live? Xie Guangbuo. You're not planning on killing people and robbing them, are you? Peng Zhan paused as he looked at Lin Yi worriedly. Don't worry, I won't kill Xie Guangbuo. Lin Yi gave Peng Zhan a reassuring smile. Killing him is the only way to solve the problem once and for all, but according to what you said earlier, I'd rather kill Jin Gubong than Xie Guangbuo. Since I've set my sights on Xie Guangbuo, I can't do something like that. Naturally, it wasn't that Lin Yi hadn't thought of killing Jin Gubong, but he didn't want to bring unnecessary trouble to Peng Zhan. Jin Gubong, no matter what, he was still the second largest shareholder of Peng Zhan Industries. The death of a small fry wouldn't be a big deal, but the death of a shareholder would definitely attract attention. Lin Yi still wanted to live a peaceful life in Songshan, so he didn't want to cause any trouble for now. That's good. Peng Zhan nodded. Xie Guangbuo's house is in the Qianhua waterfront district, in the private villa area F. The 6th villa is his house. I understand, leave it to me, Lin Yi said. I'll go talk to him now. Chapter 309. Chapter 309. How did you get in? Lin Yi thought that it was quite possible. If Faubert really was Peng Zhan's bodyguard, then he had to be a physical practitioner just like Wu Chintian. While he was a practitioner, he didn't have any qi in his body because he trained in physical arts. Lin Yi wouldn't be able to sense the qi in his body, nor would he be able to tell what level he was at. As a result, Faubert was a little mysterious in Lin Yi's eyes. Being able to stay by Peng Zhan's side for so many years meant that a kid like Wu Chintian couldn't be compared to Faubert. Just how strong was he? Lin Yi didn't think that Faubert wasn't only responsible for Peng Zhan's safety, but he also had to take care of Meng Yao and Yushu's safety when they went to school. Lin Yi didn't know if anyone had tried to harm Meng Yao or not, but judging from the fact that Meng Yao and Yushu were still alive, Faubert had to be pretty strong. Li Fu seemed to have sensed Lin Yi's gaze on his back. After a moment of silence, he spoke up. You're right, I'm Mr. Chu's guard. There's a master beside Mr. Xie who's no weaker than me, but I'm a physical practitioner now and he's a spiritual practitioner. Oh. Lin Yi's interest was piqued by Faubert's words. What did this now mean? He used to practice the inner qi method? But why didn't he feel anything at all? I'll be careful. Lin Yi didn't really mind. A master He was a master himself. With that, Lin Yi got out of the car and prepared to drive his van to Guangbo. There was no reason for Lin Yi to wait now that he knew what the problem was. Wait, your van isn't going to be discovered, is it? Peng Zhan asked as he looked at Lin Yi's van. Heh. Uncle Chu, what do you think I'm going to do? Lin Yi used the key to open the car door and prepared to get in. I'm going to talk to Xie Guangbuo face to face. I'm not afraid of him recognizing me. I see. Peng Zhan nodded. Why don't you drive Yao Yao's car? The people living in that district are all rich. Your car might be stopped at the entrance of the district. Then I will drive Little Shu's beetle. Since I have the key, I don't need to bother Yao Yao anymore. Lin Yi nodded, locked his broken van and went to the garage to get the car. Qianhua Waterfront District was one of the most luxurious districts in Songshan. This place was known as the symbol of Songshan's nobility. Every household here had a duplex layout and there were even independent villas. Basically, every household had a starting price of 10 million, and a villa could be sold for more than 30 million. The people who could live here were either wealthy or respectable. And this lead river shore was known as Songshan's wealthy district. Although not all rich people lived here, those who lived here were definitely rich people. Pengzhan didn't buy a house here because his current place was even more luxurious than this. As the third largest shareholder of Pengzhan Industries, one of the top 500 companies in the country, it wasn't surprising that Guanghua had a villa here. Besides, this Lead River Shore project was developed by Pengzhan Industries. The management of Lead River Shore was very strict. Cars from outside were stopped at the entrance of the district. Only cars with a high enough grade would be let through, or cars with the district pass would be let through after it was confirmed that they were residents of the district. Lin Yi's Beetle wasn't too expensive, but people who could afford it usually didn't have the first car in their family. Lin Yi's Beetle was easily let through by the security guards. He didn't ask around for directions either, and drove around the area until he found Area F. It was actually quite easy to find the area with all the bungalows and villas in the area. Lin Yi parked the car in front of the 6th villa and got out of the car. However, Lin Yi didn't press the doorbell. Instead, he stepped on the transformer box beside the villa and jumped up to the balcony on the 2nd floor. Although Guanghua lived in a luxurious villa, he wasn't a person who liked luxury. He lived here because of his identity as a shareholder. Sometimes he couldn't afford to lose face. If he lived in a shabby place, his business partners would be worried about his capabilities. Guanghua didn't remarry after losing his wife in his middle age. He didn't have much desire for material things and he wasn't interested in women either. So after his wife passed away, he didn't bring any random women back to live with him. Guanghua's biggest wish was that his son could take over his career and make a name for himself. However, he didn't expect that his son would get addicted to gambling and drugs. He sent his son overseas to study with good intentions so that he could come back and help him. Gambling wasn't a big deal. A little gambling was fun and Guanghua would occasionally play a few rounds with his old friends. But drugs? That was a bottomless pit. No matter how much money one had, it would be sucked into it. This time his son actually owed a foreign mafia 100 million. Although Guanghua was furious, he only had one son and he couldn't just ignore it. Guanghua had just ended the call with his son. Seeing his son beaten up badly, Guanghua's heart ached. He wanted to rush to his son's side and save him. Guanghua. A voice sounded in front of Xia Guanghua. Xia Guanghua was startled. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a shocking scene. Who are you? Guanghua looked like he saw a ghost as he looked at Lin Yi in disbelief. He had ended the call with his son and was in a daze for a while. Then there was another person in the room. The reason why Guanghua was surprised wasn't that Lin Yi had snuck into his room without a sound, but that Lin Yi had gotten in. When he was on the phone with his son, Guanghua purposely locked the door from the inside to prevent the housekeeper and bodyguards from hearing what he said. The room key was in his hands, so how did this person get in? More importantly, how did he get in? There were nannies and bodyguards downstairs, and it was impossible for him to enter without alerting them. If it was a normal visit, the nannies would have notified him, and if it was an abnormal intrusion, the bodyguards would have stopped him. But this person came in and stood in front of him and he didn't even notice. Chapter 310. The bodyguard appears. Lin Yi pointed at the open window, not answering Guanghua's question. Can I ask you something? Why did you support Jin Gubong in the board meeting? Guanghua paused, understanding where Lin Yi was coming from. Pengzhan sent you? You can leave now. Go back and tell him that there's no room for discussion. You've been eating too many stupid pills, haven't you? Why would he send me here? I'm helping out of my own volition. Lin Yi curled his lips. Did this guy think he was some small fry? Asking him to pass on the message? Was he stupid? Pengzhan treated him pretty well, but Lin Yi had come to Songshan only because of his old man. Other than old Lin and his assassin master, there was no one else who could send Lin Yi to do anything. Then what do you do? Guanghua was a little surprised at Lin Yi's words. This guy didn't seem to be Pengzhan's follower at all. What did he do then? Lin Yi frowned impatiently. I'm Ming Yao's bodyguard. Ah. Guangbo was taken aback. Ming Yao's bodyguard was here for him? Wasn't he being a busybody? You're Ming Yao's bodyguard. What are you doing here instead of protecting her? You don't believe me when I say you're retarded. Lin Yi glared at him like he was an idiot. Pingzhan's Ming Yao's dad. Who's going to pay for my expenses if he loses his job? Lin Yi was just saying that to draw a line between him and Pingzhan. Pingzhan could push all the blame away if things got exposed. If word got out that Pingzhan threatened the shareholders, it wouldn't be good for his reputation. Guangbo was speechless. Were you the retarded one or was I? Why was a bodyguard like you meddling in company business? Guangbo realized something all of a sudden. You're here for money, aren't you? Tell me how much. It was no wonder that Guangbo thought of Lin Yi as a money grubber. Lin Yi's identity had nothing to do with the company's business. I say, why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you want to die? Lin Yi kicked the safe beside him, sending it flying. It landed in front of Guangbo with a bang, just 1 centimeter away from his toes. Guangbo was completely caught off guard. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Was he still human? Was he really a bodyguard? How could he be so awesome? He could send a safe that weighed a few hundred pounds flying with just 1 kick? When he looked at the safe, Guangbo felt a chill down his spine. On the side of the safe there was a big hole. He was kicked out by Lin Yi. This kind of vault safe was surrounded by thick iron plates. How could he kick a hole through it? It was already difficult for the thief to cut it open with a chainsaw, so how could he kick it? Of course, this was not the main problem. The main problem was that if the safe had flown any higher or further, he would have lost his life. I want you to stay away from Jin Gubang. Do you understand? Lin Yi didn't bother asking why the guy was helping Jin Gubang. As long as he was afraid of death, he'd better get as far away from Gubang as possible. Guangbo's face paled, but he didn't say anything. He couldn't answer Lin Yi. What would happen to his son if he stayed away from Jin Gubang? Guangbo was scared, but he couldn't lower his head. Tell me, how much money do I have to pay for you to let me go? Money? You think you're rich? Lin Yi said disdainfully as he walked over. Guangbo shrunk back subconsciously. Lin Yi, however, didn't do anything to Guangbo. He walked over to the safe that was dented by the kick and pulled hard. The door was pulled down by Lin Yi. Is there any money in this safe? Lin Yi flipped through the contents of the safe and found a bank book. He opened it, but Lin Yi was disappointed. There was a lot of money in the bank book, 40 million, but it had all been withdrawn a few days ago. There's only a few kwai left in your bank book. How are you going to give me money? Guangbo remembered that he'd transferred all his savings to his son a couple of days ago. Where would he have the money to give to Lin Yi? Teske, looks like you're in need of money. Is that why you agreed to Jin Gubang's request? Lin Yi tossed the bank book aside and continued flipping through the contents of the safe. He smiled when he took out a stack of documents. Pengzhan Industries shares? All right, you can transfer them to me now. No. Guangbo abruptly sat up straight, a determined look on his face. That's impossible. Is that so? Lin Yi tossed the shares to the side. Do you want your life or the shares? However, at that moment the door was kicked open and a man rushed in. As soon as the man rushed in, he shouted, Mr. Xia, are you all right? As soon as he asked the question, he saw Lin Yi and tensed up. He'd heard the loud noise coming from Guangbo's room and felt that something was wrong. He'd rushed up to see Lin Yi as if he was facing a powerful enemy. The man was around 30 years old with an unprepossessing appearance. He was the type of person who'd be easily overlooked in a crowd. This type of person was perfect for a bodyguard. Guangbo let out a breath of relief when he saw the man walk in, a relaxed expression on his face. He knew how strong a bodyguard was, and although Lin Yi was strong, he wasn't a match for this man. Huang, kill him. Xia Guangbo ordered the man who just came in. This person who could threaten his life, Xia Guangbo would not let him live in this world. Otherwise, the bodyguard could protect him, but it was impossible for the bodyguard to be by his side 24/7, especially when Lin Yi could sneak into his room without a sound. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. Guangbo was afraid of this kind of ability. If Lin Yi attacked him without alerting him next time, it would be difficult for him to escape. However, as he shouted, he'd already flown up and threw a punch at Lin Yi. Who are you? Ha! Lin Yi smiled faintly as he raised his fist. He didn't move from his spot as if he was welcoming someone. The man was stunned. He didn't expect Lin Yi to take his punch head-on. This made him feel incredulous and he increased the strength of his fist. He was ready to kill Lin Yi with one punch. Chapter 311. More Than Life. Bang. A loud sound rang out and Lin Yi didn't move an inch from where he stood. Huang, on the other hand, flew out in a straight line, landing on the wall in front of the room with another bang. The wall caved in and the decorative picture frame fell to the ground, hitting Huang's head. Huang, however, was already unconscious, lying there motionless with a trail of black blood at the corner of his mouth. Lin Yi hadn't used his full strength after all. An early-phase golden class master wasn't worth it at all. Lin Yi had only reflected Huang's attack back at him. It was the same as punching himself. It wasn't enough to take Huang's life, but he'd have to stay in bed for a while. Lin Yi was here to negotiate with Guangbo, not to kill him. As for his bodyguard, Lin Yi wouldn't kill him. Just who are you? Guangbo didn't expect his bodyguard to die before Lin Yi could even finish one move. Of course, he didn't know that Huang was still alive. As far as he was concerned, Huang hadn't moved at all after flying out. What else could it be other than dead? I told you I'm Ming Yao's bodyguard, or maybe I'm not her bodyguard. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Lin Yi shrugged. But now, can you sign the shares transfer agreement with me? I don't want to kill anyone, so don't force me. Guangbo was a little dispirited. Huang was his only hope and he knew how strong he was. He was a legendary golden class master. If Huang hadn't owed him a favor back then, a master of that level wouldn't have come to protect him. But a master of that level had been killed by Lin Yi. This shocked and terrified Guangbo. I can't transfer the shares to you. Guangbo shook his head. Absolutely not. So you want to die? Lin Yi was a little annoyed. There were people who cared about money more than their lives. This was the first time. This guy was obviously scared out of his wits, but when it came to shares he refused to budge. I don't want to. Guangbo shook his head, his eyes flashing with determination. I can't give you the shares even if I die. Lin Yi really didn't know what to say. He really wanted to slap this guy in front of him to death. Lin Yi picked up the door plank of the safe. He wanted to give Guangbo another shock. He wanted to bend the plank to scare him, but Guangbo misunderstood. He thought that Lin Yi had lost his patience and was about to kill him. Guangbo suddenly said, Wait. Don't kill me. I can give you the shares, but you have to wait for a few days. How many days? Lin Yi was taken aback. At least after Jin Gubong becomes the chairman of the company, I'll give all my shares to you. Xia Guangbo said, even if I go to jail it doesn't matter. You can kill me and I'll give you the shares, but I can't do it now. Guangbo's words confused Lin Yi. He had to wait for Jin Gubong to become the chairman before giving him the shares? He could even kill him afterwards. Was there such a ridiculous thing in the world? Was this Jin Gubong his father or grandfather? Was he really worth doing this for? What did Jin Gubong give you? Lin Yi frowned. My son, he's studying abroad, but he got addicted to gambling and drugs. He owes the local mafia 100 million and they've got him under their control. They'll kill him if I don't give them the money. Guangbo knew that if he didn't explain things to Lin Yi wouldn't let him go. He might even kill him in a fit of rage. Oh. You're saying that Jin Gubong paid for your son's debt? Lin Yi frowned. So that was the reason? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. What a pitiful parent. In order to save his son, Xia Guangbo would rather die than to transfer his shares to him. But in order to save his son, he could give up his shares and life. No, he doesn't have that much liquid cash and neither do I. Guangbo smiled bitterly. My son owes them US dollars. The 40 million I have in my bank account is just a drop in the bucket. But Jin Gubong has promised me that he'll let me use the company's funds after he becomes the chairman. Fuck. Lin Yi really wanted to curse. This Jin Gubong was quite mean, agreeing to something like that. It seemed like he was willing to do anything to become the chairman, sacrificing the company's profits for this position. Where's your son? I'll bring him back and you'll give me the shares. Lin Yi didn't use a questioning tone at the end, but a commanding tone instead. It was an unquestionable order. Guangbo blinked. What, you don't believe in my strength? Lin Yi narrowed his eyes at Guangbo. No, of course not. Guangbo quickly shook his head. What a joke. How could he dare doubt Lin Yi's strength now? Even Ah Huang was beaten to a point where he didn't even know if he was dead or alive. Strength like that was rare in this world. But as strong as he was up against a foreign mafia. Could he really bring his son back? Do you really think your son will come back safe and sound after giving them money? Lin Yi looked at Guangbo mockingly. Why don't you use your brain and think about it? Do you think they'll let a money tree like this go? Drug and gambling addictions are the hardest to kick. As long as he's still alive, you'll just have to prepare more money next time. Guangbo didn't deny it. He agreed with Lin Yi's words in his heart. This wasn't the first time his son had asked for money, but there were all sorts of reasons he'd come up with before, but none of them had asked for as much as this time. He'd offended some powerful people. He wanted to buy a car. His girlfriend ran away with someone. Guangbo told his son to come back as soon as possible after giving him the money, but his son didn't seem to listen at all. Now that he thought about it, Lin Yi was probably telling the truth. His son was using the money to pay off his debt and loan sharks. I'll give you 1 second to think. Do you want to die now, or do you want to bring your son back and give me the shares? Lin Yi looked at Guangbo as he slowly raised the safe. All right, 1 second's up. Wait. Guangbo quickly waved his hand. I agree. Chapter 312. Yao Yao's complaint. Lin Yi looked at Guangbo and nodded, satisfied. He threw the safe down. Let's put off Jing Gubong. I'll get your son back in a week. Don't try anything funny or you and your son. Lin Yi didn't finish his sentence, but Guangbo understood what he meant. Don't worry, as long as my son's fine, I'll cooperate with you no matter what. Guangbo had thought it through as well. Lin Yi really bringing his son back would be for the best. He'd have no shares and no money, but he'd be able to let his son live a hard life like a normal person. Without the money for drugs and gambling, his son might be able to walk the right path. I hope you'll do as you say. Lin Yi looked at Guangbo deeply, noticing that his eyes were clear. I'll fulfill your wish as well. Give me your son's information and send it to my voicemail. My phone number is 152x × 1234. I'll send it to you in a bit. May I ask? Guangbo asked carefully. He won't die. A golden class master like him only needs half a month to recover. Lin Yi said with a wave of his hand. Guangbo's heart skipped a beat. Lin Yi could see through Huang's strength so easily? What kind of strength did he have then? But the stronger Lin Yi was, the happier Guangbo was. It was the only way Lin Yi could bring his son back from the mafia. Lin Yi didn't jump out the window this time. He walked out the front door with a swagger, disappearing from Guangbo's sight in the Beetle. Beetle? Guangbo blinked. He glanced at the license plate and remembered that it was Yu Shu's, Ming Yao's best friend's car. Was he really one of Ming Yao's people? But Guangbo couldn't believe that a master like that would be Ming Yao's bodyguard. How was that possible? Even Pingzhan's Faubert wasn't as strong as him, was he? Guangbo shook his head and stopped guessing Lin Yi's identity. There was no point in guessing. He just needed to follow Lin Yi's instructions. She called Nurse Wang in the servant's room and asked her to send Ah Huang back to his room. Since Lin Yi said that Ah Huang was fine, it should be fine. When he entered the room, Ah Huang was already awake. He opened his eyes with difficulty and looked at Guangbo. Mr. Xia, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. Don't say any more. The other party was very powerful. Are you all right? Do you need to go to the hospital? Guangbo waved his hand. He couldn't blame Ah Huang for being weaker than him. Ah Huang had tried his best. No, I'll be fine after some rest. Huang shook his head. He's at least a late-phase golden class. Mr. Xie, you're not hurt? No. Guangbo smiled bitterly. A late-phase golden class was 2 levels higher than Ah Huang. Naturally, Ah Huang wouldn't be a match for a master like that. Lin Yi drove back to the villa area only to find that Pingzhan's car was still there. Pingzhan wasn't in the car anymore, but Faubert was sitting quietly in the driver's seat. Where's Uncle Chu? Lin Yi asked after parking the car. Chapter 313. Chapter 313, Small Matter. Pingzhan's words warmed Lin Yi's hearts. It seemed that Pingzhan wasn't treating him as a hired person, he was caring for someone younger than him. Uncle Chu, actually, this is really a small matter. Lin Yi felt very blessed right now. Someone cared for him every day. Was this the life of a normal person? Small matter? This is a small matter. You're about to face a foreign mafia. Peng Zhan said seriously. They're different from the gangsters back in China. They're a bunch of desperados with guns and ammunitions. How am I supposed to answer to Elder Lin if something were to happen to you? Even my father wouldn't let me off the hook. Lin Yi didn't know how old Lin communicated with Peng Zhan, but it seemed like the old man didn't know what he'd done in the past. Not to mention a mafia leader, he'd even send private armies and mercenary leaders of smaller countries to their deaths. Uncle Chu, you'd know if you knew my old man. Actually, what I'm about to do is really a small matter. Lin Yi explained with a bitter smile. But I believe you. Peng Zhan nodded after hearing Lin Yi's words. You can just call Faubert and get him to take care of the plane ticket. I'll be going back first. Since Guangbo won't be on Jin Gubong's side anymore, I'll have to reconsider how to deal with Gubong. Alright, take care, Uncle Chu. Lin Yi got up and walked Peng Zhan to the door. Peng Zhan waved his hand and left the villa after a few words with Meng Yao. It was getting late, and Meng Yao and Yushu locked the door and turned off the TV, yawning as they went upstairs to sleep. Lin Yi, on the other hand, sat in front of his computer and logged into his mailbox. As expected, Guangbo had already sent all the information on his son to Lin Yi. Xie Guangbo's son was Xie Jinbiao. He was 19 years old and was an international student. However, he was now brought to a remote town called Blue Town. It was a border town of a small country. Due to its geographical location, public security was very chaotic. The entire town was under the control of the local gangs. Xie Jinbiao was captured there. The Blue Water Gang didn't seem to be afraid of revealing their location to Guangbo because the city was completely under the mafia's control. They didn't think that Guangbo's influence would reach here at all. Even the other gangs nearby would give the Blue Water some face, and wouldn't trespass on their territory for no good reason. Of course, the Blue Water leader didn't think Guangbo had the ability to do so even if he did. Life or death was up to the Blue Water Gang's whims once they entered the city. The headquarters of the Blue Water Gang was located in the ancient Blue Castle of Blue City. The castle had a bit of history, and belonged to the owner of the city, a great family that had a glorious era. But that was a thing of the past since the entire family had been wiped out after offending a powerful being a few decades ago. That was a very powerful family. In the past, the business and political power of the little blue city was completely controlled by this family. So when this family was destroyed, this place was in a state of chaos for a period of time. A few years later, Blue Town was taken over by the Blue Water and order was restored. It was just a small gang after all and couldn't compare to a big family. The city's economy plummeted, and the Blue Water Gang had no choice but to use drugs and gambling to attract tourists. A strange smile appeared on Lin Yi's face as he looked at the information Guangbo had given him. Blue Town? Blue Castle? That name sounded familiar. His assassin master had said that he'd wiped out a trash family before, but Lin Yi couldn't remember if they lived in Blue Castle. Lin Yi called Faubert and asked him to book a plane ticket for tomorrow night. It wouldn't take more than 2 days and it shouldn't affect his attendance at Kong Xiaobo's birthday party. Lin Yi got a call from Xuemin the next morning. The Lius had already gathered the money for the doctor's treatment, 100 million. They could transfer it over at any time. Lin Yi was amazed by this. Weren't the Lius a little too efficient? They had money so early in the morning? What they didn't know was that Elder Zhenhu was the pillar of the Lius. No matter how much money they had to protect him first. I understand, Grandpa Guan. I'll be there in a bit. Lin Yi said. Let them wait. Xuemin smiled and hung up the phone. He told Lu Tianyi about Lin Yi's intentions. However, Lu Tianyi wasn't angry at all. Everyone was like this, so what if he had to wait for a while? If Lin Yi heard that the money was ready and rushed over, Lu Tianyi would even suspect that Lin Yi was a scammer. Now that Lin Yi didn't seem to care, Lu Tianyi felt that it was normal. 100 million, if it was any other ordinary teenager they might not know what to do. How big of a number was that? But Lin Yi had asked for 100 million straight away as if he didn't care about it at all. Lu Tianyi felt that Lin Yi was very confident that he could cure his old man's illness. That was why he dared to ask for such a price. Lu Tianyi had Wu Huiru get ready to wake up the old man while he contacted his subordinates to prepare the money as soon as possible. It wouldn't be fun if Lin Yi turned around and left in a rage before the money was ready. Lin Yi put his phone down and went to the kitchen. He needed breakfast every day anyway, so he'd bring some for Meng Yao and Yushu along the way. Come to think of it, the girls were quite pitiful. Their parents were busy with work and they didn't have anyone to take care of them. They were in their 12th year of high school, studying late into the night with severe lack of sleep. How was this the life of a miss? The two were smart, but there were too many smart people in the college entrance exam. In the end, it still depended on who had the most preparation. Being smart wasn't enough to get good grades. This was something Lin Yi admired. Even if they didn't take the college entrance exams, Peng Zhan could have easily found a good university for them with his strength alone. Yet they relied on their own hard work to get good grades. This was a fundamental difference from Zhong Pingliang, who only knew how to eat and wait for death. Chapter 314. Pingliang. Depressed Lin Yi drove his old van to school, following Faubert's Bentley from afar. Actually, Faubert's skills were more than enough for him to handle emergencies. There weren't many people who would attack this bulletproof Bentley on the way to school. Lin Yi saw Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo, and Lu Xinwen getting off the bus when they were almost at school. He didn't think that they would bump into each other in the morning. Lin Yi had heard that Kong Xiaobo and Tang Yun were going the same way, but Kong Xiaobo didn't know Kong Xiaobo before. Now Kong Xiaobo could officially stand together with Tang Yun, his sister-in-law. Didi. Lin Yi pressed the horn twice. Xiaobo frowned as he turned around to see an old van. What the hell was an old van honking for? Plus, the road was wide and there was nothing in the way. But Tang Yun looked at the bun and found it familiar. She looked at the person in the driver's seat and a smile appeared on her face. That smile made Lin Yi a little dazed and he almost drove the car over. Fortunately, his reflexes were quick or it would have been a tragedy. Is that boss? Kong Xiaobo saw that it was Lin Yi who was driving. He ran over with his backpack and jumped in. He called out to Tang Yun and Lu Xinwen, "You guys get in too?" Tang Yun was a bit bashful. They were almost at school, why would they need to take a car? Wouldn't it be fine to just walk? Okay. Lu Xinwen replied and pulled Tang Yun into the van. Boss, is this your car? Kong Xiaobo looked at the broken van, speechless. This was completely different from the boss Lin he knew. Hey, you guessed it right. This is my car. Lin Yi handed the license to Kong Xiaobo. I just got it yesterday. Kong Xiaobo looked at the license and saw that it was indeed Lin Yi's name. He was speechless. This car really belonged to Lin Yi. Was the Beetle really borrowed? Boss, is this the car you mentioned yesterday? Kong Xiaobo handed the license back to Lin Yi. Yeah, I'm actually really poor, but I have a rich relative. It's already good enough that I can drive this car. Lin Yi smiled. Lin Yi's words touched Kong Xiaobo and Lu Xinwen. Lin Yi didn't seem to be the young master they were talking about. However, it was commendable for him to use all his money to pay for Xiaofen's medical fees. Tang Yun had long noticed that Lin Yi was different from others. He was curious about Lin Yi. Lin Yi didn't look like a young master, but sometimes, Lin Yi was even more arrogant than those young masters. As for this car, Tang Yun was familiar with it. It seemed to be the car that was snatched from Heibao that night and Lin Yi took it for himself. Although Tang Yun didn't approve of this robbery, Heibao was too much. Being punished by Lin Yi with a car was already very light. Of course, Tang Yun didn't know that Heibao was still lying in the hospital's intensive care unit. The bones in his body were all broken. It would take at least half a year for him to recover. Lin Yi parked the car in the food street behind the school and the four entered the school together. The students of the school were already used to these four people who were often together. Even Wang Jifeng, the Dean of Academic Affairs, was not used to them and nodded at them. Dean Wang. Lin Yi suddenly remembered that he was going abroad and wanted to ask for a leave. Oh. Lin Yi, what's the matter? Wang Jifeng squeezed a smile on his face. He already had a shadow in his heart. Every time he had an affair with the female teacher, he couldn't help but think about it. Lin Yi knew about it, so when Lin Yi called him, he couldn't help but think about the affair with the female teacher. This was a strange circle, the cycle of cause and effect, repeated over and over again. However, Wang Jifeng was a bit afraid. This kid always did things that made him feel embarrassed. Would he find him for something? Well, I might have something to do these 2 days. I need to ask for a few days of leave. Is that okay? Lin Yi asked. If that's the case, of course it's okay. Go do what you need to do, I'll tell your homeroom teacher. Wang Jifeng heard this and immediately calmed down. Jifeng calmed down after hearing that. It wasn't a big deal at all, and it wasn't the first time Lin Yi skipped class either. After Wang Jifeng left, Kong Xiaobo was a bit curious. Boss, you need to ask for a leave? What do you need to do? You won't miss my second grandpa's birthday this weekend, right? Tang Yun also widened her eyes and stared at Lin Yi. She also wanted to ask, but Kong Xiaobo asked first. Only Lu Xinwen wasn't interested. Whether Lin Yi went to school or not didn't have much to do with her. I was invited to treat a patient. Lin Yi naturally couldn't say that he was going abroad, so he said it with a lie. Treat? You know how to treat patients, right? You know acupuncture. Lu Xinwen was a bit surprised, but she suddenly remembered what happened with Xiaofan and nodded. I'm just going to help, Lin Yi smiled. That's not bad. Kong Xiaobo gave a thumbs up in admiration. Boss, hurry up and improve your medical skills. It would be great if you can treat Xiaofan. I will work hard. Lin Yi nodded. Kong Xiaobo and Tang Yun knew that Lin Yi had some medical skills, so they didn't find it strange that Lin Yi went to see a patient. Last time, Lin Yi told Tang Yun that he had a way to treat Xiaofan's illness, but he couldn't do it now. So Tang Yun and Kong Xiaobo naturally thought that Lin Yi was talking about his medical skills not being enough. Tang Yun wanted to ask Lin Yi if he could take a look at her father's illness, but she remembered that Lin Yi couldn't do anything for Xiaofan, so she didn't ask. When they entered the class, Meng Yao and Yushu were already sitting on their seats. Lin Yi and Kong Xiaobo walked in, and the two raised their heads to look at Lin Yi before going back to their work. Pin Liang was depressed. He had said that he was going to write a letter of love to Meng Yao yesterday, but it ended because of the bloody mess. No one brought it up today, but Pin Liang felt like everyone was looking at him strangely. It was almost as if they were mocking him. Pin Liang didn't know if it was his imagination playing tricks on him, but he felt a little uneasy. He couldn't keep cutting on the same wound yesterday, wouldn't that hurt? As a result, Pin Liang couldn't bring himself to do it. Liang bro, a man should be harder on himself. Do you want me to help you? Xiaofu asked. You'll help me? Pin Liang blinked. Sure. Fu, you're such a good friend. If that's the case, I won't hold back. I'll treat you to lunch. Xiaofu paused as well, a bitter smile on his face. He'd wanted to cut Pin Liang's finger with the carving knife, but Pin Liang had clearly misunderstood him, thinking that he wanted to cut his finger and write a blood letter for him. What's wrong? Pin Liang handed the carving knife to Xiaofu. Is there a problem? Nothing. Xiaofu took the knife and gritted his teeth, cutting his index finger. Blood gushed out, but Pin Liang's hemorrhage from yesterday didn't happen. Alright Fu, don't move. I'll use your finger to write a blood letter. With that, Pin Liang held Xiaofu's finger and started writing on the paper in front of him. What he didn't know was that this wasn't unseen. Yushu, who wasn't far away, had her phone raised and zoomed in on the camera, just enough to see Pin Liang and Xiaofu clearly. Yao Yao, this Pin Liang guy isn't much, isn't he? He's using Xiaofu's finger to write a blood letter for you? Isn't that a little too insincere? Yushu said with a giggle. What does that have to do with me? Meng Yao said, ignoring Yushu as she continued reading her book. Man, that's boring. Yushu put her phone away, a little disappointed. I wanted to see Pin Liang's hand turn into a water gun one more time. Meng Yao was speechless. What was there to see? Were you afraid that Pin Liang would die too slowly? The first class ended, and Pin Liang ran over to Meng Yao's desk with the letter written in Xiaofu's blood. He held the letter up with both hands. Yao Yao, please accept my confession of love from the bottom of my heart. Meng Yao frowned. She didn't even look at Pin Liang, nor did she care about him. Yushu, on the other hand, stood up with a smile and took the letter from Pin Liang's hands. Let me check it for you first. Is there anything wrong with it? Okay. Pin Liang was overjoyed that Yushu was willing to help. With Yushu, Meng Yao's best friend, giving him pointers, wouldn't it be just a matter of time before he got to Meng Yao? Yushu opened the letter. She didn't want to read it, actually. She didn't have the time to read this guy's crappy letter. But Yushu had an even better idea. What do you think? Pin Liang looked at Yushu expectantly, waiting for her pointers. Hey, why didn't you sign it? Who'd know who wrote it if you did that? Yushu's eyes darted around. She'd finally found an entry point. Sign. Pin Liang blinked. Isn't this a letter written by me? Do I even need to sign it? Of course you're not sincere at all. Yushu said with a straight face. You don't even have a sign on your letter, it's not official at all. No wonder you couldn't get Yao Yao after all this time. Yushu curled her lips as she spoke, a look of disdain on her face. He thought that Lin Yi was going to kick him again, but after the push, Lin Yi strode over without hesitation. Phew. Pin Liang breathed out in relief. It seemed like Lin Yi didn't do anything to him because he was in a hurry to go to the washroom. Wah. Yushu pointed at Pin Liang's finger excitedly. Liang Yi, your finger's bleeding. That's so cool. Do you have superpowers? Is this the legendary six-pulse blade? Pin Liang blinked, not understanding what Yushu was talking about. He lowered his head to continue writing, only to realize that the paper was already soaked in blood. His hand, on the other hand. Blood was gushing out like a fountain just like yesterday. Ah. Pin Liang yelped as he tossed the blood letter aside and ran back to his seat. Fu, band-aids, give me a band-aid. Yushu raised two fingers in a V shape as she watched Pin Liang run away. She cheered happily. Yay, success. Shield bro and I work well together. Meng Yao didn't know what to say as she looked at her best friend. She was now certain that Pin Liang's bleeding yesterday had to have been caused by Lin Yi. Before Lin Yi came over, Pin Liang's finger was still bleeding very slowly, but after Lin Yi came over, the blood was gushing out like a fountain. It was obviously Lin Yi's doing. Lin Yi and Yushu? They really were a match made in heaven, the prankster duo. It'd be hard for Pin Liang not to be crippled in the future. Meng Yao's heart ached a little at the thought of Yushu and Lin Yi being a match made in heaven. She had to admit that Yushu and Yushu were very similar in some ways. Hee hee, Yao Yao, what do you think? Feels good, right? Let's see if Pin Liang dares write that blood letter again. Yushu turned back to look at Pin Liang, only to see him trying to wrap a band-aid around his wound. One band-aid wasn't enough to stop the blood anymore. Pin Liang had no choice but to wrap it around his finger with cellophane tape. Only this sort of airtight tape could stop the wound. Pin Liang found it strange. How did his finger end up like this? It had never happened before. Lin Yi went to the washroom and returned to the classroom. Yushu winked at him and made a victory sign with her hand. Lin Yi smiled. Boss, why did you go out just now? Didn't you see that amazing scene? Kong Xiaobo looked at Lin Yi with a pitiful expression. Oh, what's wrong? Lin Yi asked with a smile as he sat down in his seat. You didn't see it, but Pin Liang started spewing blood again. It was spectacular, I've never seen anyone bleed like that before. Kong Xiaobo said. You didn't see it, but it's even worse than yesterday. The blood was shooting out of his hand. Ah. Is that so? Lin Yi said. Of course it was worse than yesterday. He'd only sped up his blood circulation yesterday, but he'd raised his blood pressure today. Lin Yi's phone vibrated again as he spoke. He'd received a text. Chapter 317. I don't understand, Kong Xiaobo asked curiously. Boss, whose text is it? It can't be from sis-in-law Tang Yun, right? What Tang Yun? She doesn't even have a phone. Lin Yi glared at Kong Xiaobo. It's the weather report. Oh. Kong Xiaobo remembered that Lin Yi was going to buy a phone with Tang Yun at noon. He was going to buy one for Xiaofan as well. At noon, Lin Yi, Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo and Lu Xingwen left the school together. Lin Yi had an old van, so he didn't need to take a taxi anymore. Although the car wasn't good, it was better than nothing. Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo wants to buy a phone for Xiaofan. It'll be easier to contact her. What about you? Lin Yi asked Tang Yun, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Kong Xiaobo gave the seat to Tang Yun and sat in the back with Lu Xingwen. Me? I'm not buying it. I don't have much use for it. Tang Yun shook her head. Her family situation didn't allow her to buy a phone. Although it wasn't expensive, she would need to buy a SIM card and a monthly rental fee. It wasn't a small amount, so Tang Yun rejected it. Boss will pay for it. Xiaobo continued. Fin's phone was a gift from my boss, sis-in-law. She'd never accept it if he bought her a phone if he didn't want it, sis-in-law. Please help me. Tang Yun couldn't help but giggle after hearing Kong Xiaobo's words. Begging someone to buy a phone for them. However, Tang Yun remembered that Lin Yi bought her a dress at the night market and asked her for 50 kuai. Thinking about it, it was strange sometimes. Back then she had hated him to death, but now she was sitting quietly in his car, sitting beside him. She'd thrown the dress in her closet because she was mad. But she'd probably be able to find it when she got home tonight. Tang Yun couldn't help but smile at the thought. Would she have accepted the dress if he'd given it to her? The answer was no. But now Lin Yi wanted to buy her a phone, and after some persuasion from Kong Xiaobo, Tang Yun acquiesced. Lin Yi parked the car in front of a mobile phone store, and the four of them got out of the car together. When the salesperson saw that the four of them were wearing school uniforms, he knew that they were students. He immediately recommended a few cheap cell phones. Kong Xiaobo also wanted to buy a cheaper phone. He didn't want Lin Yi to spend money on a smartphone that easily cost a few thousand yuan. What price range do you want to buy? The salesperson asked. Kong Xiaobo wanted to say 200 or 300 yuan, but Lin Yi had to make the decision, so he turned to look at Lin Yi. Lin Yi knew that Kong Xiaobo wanted to buy a cheaper one. According to his plan yesterday, he wanted to buy 200 or 300 yuan, but Lin Yi didn't want to buy one that was too cheap for Tang Yun. If he bought one that was 200 or 300 yuan for Xiaofan, Lin Yi naturally wouldn't buy one that was too expensive for Tang Yun. Differential treatment, and it wouldn't be good if Xiaofan had any ideas. Around 1,000 yuan. Lin Yi thought about it and set a price. Tang Yun wouldn't be able to accept a price that was too expensive, so this price should be about right. Nokia 5233. This phone is very popular among students. It's cheap and has all the functions, but it lacks the GPS function compared to the 5230. But you students won't need that function anyway. The salesperson took out a phone and introduced it to Lin Yi and the others. The price is cheaper than the 5230, only 833 yuan. What do you think? Lin Yi pushed the phone to Tang Yun, asking for her opinion. It's pretty good, but it's a bit expensive. Tang Yun still couldn't accept the fact that she wanted something from Lin Yi. Although Kong Xiaobo tried to persuade her for a long time, she still felt that she shouldn't buy it. Heh. Lin Yi smiled and said to the salesperson, then I'll take 3 of these phones. How about, we buy the 300 yuan one? Tang Yun saw that Lin Yi wanted to buy it, so she hesitated and pointed at the 300 yuan phone. Please. Kong Xiaobo is giving it to Finn, it's too shabby, he can't take it out, right? Lin Yi whispered. Oh. Tang Yun could only nod, but she felt a bit depressed in her heart. He owed Lin Yi more and more. How could she pay him back? From the barbecue recipe to him helping her and her mother chase away those bullies, to Finn's medical fees, although Kong Xiaobo played a part in it, most of it was because of her face. So Tang Yun couldn't pretend that she didn't know anything. He saved her again. Now he wanted to buy a phone for her. Tang Yun didn't know if her relationship with Lin Yi would become more and more complicated if this continued. Did he really like her? While he was hesitating, Lin Yi had already bought 3 phones and 2 SIM cards. One of them was Finn's birthday and the other was Tang Yun's birthday. Xinwen was in charge of both of them. Lin Yi swiped the card and distributed the phones. Tang Yun got one, Kong Xiaobo got one, and Lu Xinwen had an older phone, so she didn't need to buy it. Lin Yi used the last one for himself. The expensive phone from before was also broken, so Lin Yi bought a cheap one. No matter how expensive it would be ruined if it was soaked in water. Lin Yi's job was more dangerous, so he chose a cheap phone. If it wasn't for the fact that Yushu's phone was too feminine and Lin Yi didn't want to take it out, Lin Yi would just use it. Tang Yun sighed lightly. She owed him a lot. She owed him a lot already, so a phone wouldn't make much of a difference. But when she got in the car, she whispered to Lin Yi, "Thank you, ha." Lin Yi smiled and turned his head to look at Tang Yun mischievously. Then how are you going to thank me? What? How am I going to thank you? Tang Yun jumped and blushed, remembering what she promised him yesterday at the hospital. Her heart raced. Yesterday at the hospital, you still owe me a kiss, Lin Yi said in a low voice. As expected, he was talking about that. Tang Yun blushed. What? What? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand. Chapter 318. A moment of brilliance. Lin Yi drove Tang Yun, Kong Xiaobo, and Lu Xinwen to the entrance of the hospital. I'll be leaving. Tang Yun hugged the phone, feeling a bit uneasy. It was the first time she'd received such an expensive gift from someone, and it was from a boy. Tang Yun couldn't calm down for a long time. Yeah, I won't be using my phone for the next few days. Text me if there's anything, I'll check it after I turn it on. Lin Yi said, you can take a taxi with Xiaobo later, let him pay. And Tang Yun couldn't help but smile as she listened to Lin Yi's words. Her smile was like a blooming flower. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat as he grabbed Tang Yun's hand and pulled her back. What are you doing? Tang Yun froze and looked at Kong Xiaobo and Lu Xinwen, who'd already gotten out of the car. She let out a breath of relief when she saw that they weren't looking at her. Aren't you going to say something before we leave? Lin Yi pointed at his face. Oh, I'll say it again. Tang Yun couldn't stand Lin Yi's teasing. She struggled out of Lin Yi's hand and ran out of the car. Her heart raced as she let out a long breath. She looked at Lin Yi and pouted before turning around and ignoring him. If it had been anyone else, Tang Yun would have run away crying, but with Lin Yi, all she felt was shyness. Tang Yun, who suddenly realized this, started to feel lost. Was it a good thing for her to fall deeper and deeper in love with Lin Yi? Yun, what's wrong? You don't look well? Lu Xinwen was talking to Kong Xiaobo when she looked up to see Tang Yun's reddened face. It was like she had a heat stroke. It's nothing. Tang Yun quickly shook her head. Let's go. Xinwen shook her head. She didn't know what happened to Tang Yun. She turned around to look at Lin Yi's car, but realized that Lin Yi's car was already far away. She could only bury the question in her heart. Before leaving the country, Lin Yi had to deal with Lu Zhenhu's illness first. While he could extort some money from the man, he could also give Xuemin time to start planning for the medical company. This incident made Lin Yi realize that it was better to be on time than to be on time. He was just thinking about how to get 100 million yuan of startup capital, and in the blink of an eye, the Lu family sent it to him. The efficiency of raising funds was probably unmatched. Lin Yi gave Guan Xuemin a call and told him to call Zhenhu and the others over. He'd be there soon. Alright, Lu Tiany's already waiting here, waiting for your news. He'll have someone bring Elder Lu here. Xuemin said. Have you had lunch? Not yet, but there's no rush, Lin Yi said. Alright then, I'll have Xen prepare some food. Xuemin made the decision for Lin Yi. Alright, Lin Yi didn't argue about these trivial things and drove straight to Xuemin's house. By the time Lin Yi got there, Zhenhu was already there. He was sitting in the living room waiting for Lin Yi. When he saw Lin Yi walk in, Zhenhu stood up with Lu Tiany's help. Miracle doctor, I'll have to trouble you then. Zhenhu's attitude made Lin Yi a little embarrassed. He took so much money from him and he was still being so respectful to him. But he really needed money right now, so he couldn't be soft-hearted. Plus, he couldn't be blamed for this. They only had themselves to blame for marrying a snobbish daughter-in-law and having a retarded nephew. Elder Lu, you don't have to be so polite. Lin Yi waved his hand. Let's go find an empty room. All right, Miracle Dr. Lin, about the consultation fee. Lu Tiany wasn't an idiot. Even if Lin Yi didn't ask about the consultation fee, he couldn't not mention it. If he pretended not to know, then he'd be an idiot. Grandpa Guan, do you have a bank account? Transfer it directly. Lin Yi turned to Xuemin. Transfer it to my account? Xuemin paused for a moment, then understood that Lin Yi wanted him to plan for the medical company. He nodded. Alright, transfer it to my account first. Mr. Lu, do you know my account number? I do. Lu Tiany nodded. He'd planned to transfer 2 million to Xuemin as well, so he'd memorized Xuemin's number. Lu Tiany called one of his subordinates and had them transfer the 100 million to Xuemin's account. A moment later, Xuemin's phone rang with a notification. After confirming that there were no issues, Lin Yi nodded in satisfaction. It seemed that Lu Tiany was a man of his word. He didn't have to completely cut ties with him in the future. But that wife of his was nothing to be proud of. In an empty room upstairs, Lin Yi had Zhenhu lie down and asked Xuemin for a box of silver needles. He then looked at Zhenhu quietly, not in a hurry to insert the needles. He was thinking about something. He'd already checked on Zhenhu's condition the first time they met, so he didn't need to check it again. What he needed to do now was think of a treatment plan, the quickest and most effective way to cure Zhenhu's angina. Of course, a complete cure wasn't possible, at least not right now. Old Lin's miraculous pills were hidden away like treasures, so he couldn't take them out even if he wanted to. But it was possible to keep the disease from acting up for 10 years, but that was a bit of a scam. Lin Yi sighed. Whatever, he'd keep the disease under control for 10 years first. If Zhenhu really did live to 100 years old, then he'd think of something else. With that in mind, Lin Yi quickly inserted needles into Jinhu's body. His speed was so fast that even Xuemin, the god of acupuncture, was in awe. He did it in one go. 2 minutes later, Lin Yi began inserting needles into each needle. Neguan Xiamen Inqi Juk Shanzhong, inject energy into the needles. Jiao Lao's voice suddenly rang in Lin Yi's ears. Lin Yi was overjoyed. He didn't know what kind of person Jiao Lao was, but with his help things would be much easier. Lin Yi hurriedly did as he was told. The needle handle that had been injected with energy suddenly began to vibrate with a buzzing sound, as if something was driving it. Even when Lin Yi's hand left the handle, the needles continued to vibrate on Jinhu's body. Chapter 319. A master in disguise. Lu Tianyi, who'd been watching Lin Yi's acupuncture, didn't know much about acupuncture, but he was still shocked by what he was seeing. Seeing the same expression on Guan Xuemin's face, Lu Tianyi was even more certain that Lin Yi was a master in disguise. In actuality, Lin Yi was just as shocked as Tianyi and Guan Xuemin were. He didn't think that infusing the art of dragon mastery into the needles would result in something like this. Jiao Lao, what's going on? Lin Yi asked. It's normal. Jiao Lao's voice was still calm. Although you can't use the energy from the art of dragon mastery to treat the patient with your first stage, you can still maintain it like last time. Do as I say and you should be able to make it through 10 years. What? That's it? Lin Yi was pleasantly surprised. In his original plan he'd planned to use acupuncture and medicine together. As long as the patient kept taking medicine after the acupuncture, he'd be able to control the angina, but he'd have to do acupuncture once a year. Of course he'd thought of an excuse beforehand. He'd said that he'd check up once a year, and the Lius would be more than happy to bring Jinhu over for acupuncture. That way he wouldn't go back on his promise, saying that he'd treat Jinhu for 10 years, not all at once. But now he didn't have to worry about that anymore because Jiao Lao's voice sounded. Of course. The pure energy in your body is more than enough to maintain a patient's bodily functions, and that's it. Is that strange? It is. Does that mean other golden class masters can do the same? Lin Yi asked. Didn't I say it before? Only the energy in your body is pure energy. The martial arts they practice produce pure qi, and every martial art has a different type of pure qi. That's why the pure qi produced only works on their own martial arts. If used on others it'll either be useless or have the opposite effect. Jiao Lao said with a tone of exasperation. I see. Lin Yi laughed awkwardly. In front of others Lin Yi could call them idiots, but in front of Jiao Lao Lin Yi could only laugh dryly. Alright, time to put the needles away. Now follow the order I say and insert the needles into Jian Shu. Jiao Lao named a few more acupoints. Send the energy in. Lin Yi did as he was told and the needles danced again. Guan Xuemin was amazed and Lu Tianyi even looked up to Lin Yi as if he was a god. The 100 million was worth it. If he had an argument with Lin Yi because of the 100 million, not only would he have missed out on such a miraculous treatment, but the Lu family would have missed out on a miracle doctor. Phew, Lin Yi let out a long breath. Although he had enough energy in his body, transmitting the energy for a long time still made Lin Yi sweat. After repeating this 3 times, Lin Yi put away the needles, wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, Done. Done. It wasn't that Lu Tianyi didn't trust Lin Yi, but it had only been an hour or so. His father's angina had been treated for so many years, and he had visited countless famous doctors to no avail. How could he be cured in a little more than an hour? Although he had seen the magic of Lin Yi's acupuncture, it was still hard for Lu Tianyi to believe that Lin Yi had cured his father's illness in such a short amount of time. But he didn't dare to ask, afraid that he would make Lin Yi unhappy. He could only hold back his questions and look at his father. Dad, how do you feel? Lu Tianyi could only ask his father how he felt. Much better, so comfortable. But my body feels so uncomfortable, I need to take a bath. Lu Jinhu felt refreshed, but there was a sticky feeling on his body that was very uncomfortable. Lu Tianyi ran over to help his father up, but he was shocked to see a layer of greasy black and yellow dirt on his father's skin. What is this? Guan Xuemin also walked over after being reminded by Lu Tianyi. When Lin Yi was performing acupuncture, the two of them were afraid that they would affect Lin Yi, so they stood far behind him. When they got closer, their hands were trembling in shock. Bone and marrow cleansing? Guan Xuemin naturally knew about bone and marrow cleansing in ancient medicine, but it had been lost for many years. Bone and marrow cleansing referred to the use of acupuncture or herbs to expel toxins from the body, achieving an effect similar to rebirth. It was inevitable that toxins would be stored in the body when humans ate grains. Although metabolism could expel some of it, there was still some that would be absorbed by the body. As time went on, the toxins would accumulate more and more. Guan Xuemin didn't expect Lin Yi's acupuncture to be so effective. Not only could it cure diseases, but it could also expel toxins from the body. Lin Yi paused when he heard what Guan Xuemin called him, but then Jiao Yazi's voice sounded in his ears. Lin Yi, your pure energy has a part of the effect of expelling toxins, so even if you didn't do it on purpose, it would still bring about this result. But that Lu Zhenhu will probably live a few more years and you'll have to perform acupuncture on him in 10 years. Lu Zhenhu? Lin Yi didn't know what to say, but it wasn't all that strange coming from Jiao Lao's mouth. Jiao Lao was an old monster, and although Lin Yi wanted to ask, Jiao Lao kept saying that he was too weak to know too much, so there was nothing Lin Yi could do. But one thing was for sure. Jiao Lao was far older than Lu Zhenhu, which was why he called him kid. Ha! Lin Yi smiled but didn't explain. It seemed that Lu Zhenhu's 100 million hadn't been spent in vain. Not only did it cure his illness, it also extended his life. Good things like this couldn't be bought with money. But since Zhenhu was going to live a few more years, Lin Yi had to give him a heads up.